Good morning. Welcome. Thank you for coming, and special thanks to the presenters that are going to share with us all their work, all the 2014 work. So welcome to this UOC Research Showcase. That the first one was a year, a month, 23 days, 18 hours and 20 minutes ago. And from that year, we wanted to highlight the UOC research, and a year later, we want to narrow the presentations to the publications, the research publications. So, as you know, our papers in the UOC are more than half devoted to social sciences, nearly a third to information and communication technologies, 12% to humanities, and 1% to health sciences. And we are able to produce roughly 200 papers a year, 200 indexed papers a year, and more or less 60% of them are regularly cited. I'm not taking account the most recent papers because they are going to be cited in the upcoming years. But citation varies among departments. You can see like the computer science are close to 100% of the papers. They have close to 100% the papers cited. However, this is not a bad picture. You can see that we have more dark colors than light colors. That means that we have more cited papers than no cited. But if we have a look to the papers, to the journals where we publish our papers, you can see there is a lot of gray color here. That means that we are publishing in journals that don't have impact factor, and just a small amount of them are published in the first quartile journals. And regarding our productivity, let's say our number of papers per full-time teaching and research staff, we'll see that we are able to produce a half paper per professor or per researcher. However, another indicator of productivity, we can see here the external funding per researcher. This is the 2014 report from the Catalan public universities, and although we are below the mean, which is somehow 30,000 or 31,000 euros, although we are below the mean, we are not really the very last university. So, however, you have to take into account that although this is the 2014 report, the data came from 2012, and that year we really have external funding that it was really high. It was more than 3.5 million euros that year, and you can see here where the funds came from. It's the blue Catalan, it's the green is European, red Spanish, and then international, other than EU, it's in that color. So, so we had that year a maximum, and it dropped to less than 2 million, and last year we were able to reach close to 2 million. However, we need to stress more that indicator, and by the year 2020, we aimed at reach the amount of 10 million euro coming from research and innovation external funding. And we would like to have also a productivity regarding publications of 2.5 papers per year per researcher, together with the societal impact of these indicators. I know that the societal impact is not that easy to measure like external funding or publications, but there are really very nice attempts out there, and we will try to measure it. And all of that, all these three components in a context of research integrity, I think if we are able to do so, we will be in the pathway of excellence in research. So we have done a great research effort in recent years regarding publications and external funding, but we have to really multiply these efforts in that coming years to be excellent. And to do so, research really is clearly within the UOC strategy. So we have done a restructuring internal grants to encourage applications for European research funding. We have created a doctoral school with scholarships for the 3 doctoral programs. We have run a postdoc program with 3 positions last year and 6 this year, all of them with 3 years contract. We are developing a research career within the academic policy. It has been said the productivity criteria for IN3 and e-learn center research groups. And last but not definitely least, we are working hard for attracting talent externally funded, and we are proud, we are really happy to announce that we have the first ICREA researcher at UOC. His name is Jordi Cabot, and he is coming from, or his field of research is in the software engineering. So let me finish this presentation with this quote from the philosopher Karl Popper. And if it has to be, research has to be a journey, let the journey begin, and hoping that this journey be less awful than a peer review process. So let's start now, and we'll have now 4 presenters in 4 blocks, and the first one will be David Mejir, the director of doctoral school. David?
The first speaker will be Dr. David Bañeras, and his paper is Experiences in Digital Circuit Design Courses, a self-study platform for learning support. So, David?
So let's start. So the outline of this presentation is described here. So first we'll start with a motivation, then we'll explain the contribution of the paper, the learning methodology that we have designed here, and then I will explain some experimental results and the ongoing and future work. So here I have seen many laptops and tablets, and I guess that everyone has a mobile here. So if we analyze how these devices operate, we can say that it's thanks to the operating system, the Windows, Android, iOS that we are using, and the hardware. If we focus on the hardware, a student of the degrees of computer science and telecommunication engineering need to know how these devices work, and more specifically, how the microprocessor works. If we look inside these microprocessors, we can see something like this. Basically, it's a bunch of blocks, memory, registers, and a lot of wires. So a student needs to know how this works. Not this one, because here they will need a microscope and a lot of time to see how this works. We use something like this. It's a simple microprocessor. So if we focus on the degrees, we have two basic courses where they learn how to design how to use a simple microprocessor. The first one is the computer fundamentals. So here they learn how to design this simple microprocessor. And the next one is computer structure. So here they use this microprocessor using assembler. So if we focus in the first course, this course is in the first semester of the degrees. And the main problem that we have here is that we have a high dropout. So more or less is nearly the 50% of the enrollments. And this is reflected in a low performance on the course. So here we can see a plot of the pass rate in the last semesters, where we can see that more or less is from 30% to 45%. So it's a low performance. So if we analyze the problem, we have seen that the students have many difficulties on learning how a circuit works and how to design a circuit. And basically because until now they was using a simple PowerPoint. So they design a circuit like a picture. And the problem, and the next problem is they never use a simulator. So basically simulator is to check if the behavior of the circuit is the expected one or not. So the contribution of the paper is to design an intelligent tutoring system to learn the digital circuit design. And the features are, the first one, we have a graphical interface to design the circuit. So here they have the blocks and they can easily move to the interface and create the blocks and the wires. The next feature is they can simulate, so they can check the behavior of the circuit. And the next one is they can automatically validate his exercise with a correct solution, so the solution that the instructors have designed. We have to say here that there are many possible solutions, so there are not only one circuit that have the same behavior. So this tool automatically validates all the possible solutions that can provide the correct solution. So the learning methodology is experiential learning. So basically the students start with the problem definition, so the circuit that they have to design, and then using the graphical interface, they design the circuit. Then with the tool, they verify, they validate if the solution is correct or not. And in case of incorrect, they receive a minimum feedback. So using this feedback, they can redesign the circuit, and in several steps, they can reach the correct solution. So using this trial and error methodology, they can reach the correct solution and learn how to design a circuit. So in the paper, there are several experimental results. So here we only summarize the students' performance of the course. So we have showed the continuous assessment and the final mark of the students in the semesters that we have used the tool compared with the previous ones. So we have to say here that the utilization of this tool is optional for the students. So for this reason, we have two rows. The first one is that the students that have used the tool, and the second one is the students that they decided to use the tool. So if we check the pass rate, we can see that in the semester that we have used the tool, the students that have decided this option, the percentage of pass rate is greater than in the previous semesters. And if we check this in the final mark of the course, we can see that this is also reflected in these numbers. With respect to ongoing work and the feature work in this tool, we are designing new types of exercises related to the design of digital circuits. The first one is Carnot maps. Basically, this methodology is used for simplifying Boolean functions. The second one is time chart simulation. So here, the students have the circuit, and they fill up the time chart with the expected behavior of the circuit. The next one is design definite state machines. So this is used to design circuits with memory. And the last one is the verification of hardware description languages. We have to say here that the first ones have been already designed in the new version of the tool, and the students are using this in the last semester. With respect to other features, we have introduced also gamification. So now in the tool, the students have some achievements that they can complete, and if they complete this achievement, they have some rewards in the continuous assessment mark. Related to this one, we also have a competition. So here, the students compete, which students obtain more correct exercises with the tool. And they also obtain some additional points, the first students of the list. And with respect to dissemination, this tool currently is also used in a MOOC course. In Coursera, this course is jointly with UAB. And in the last semester, in the last year, in the first edition, we have more or less 2,000 enrollments. And this year, we'll start the second edition of this course, and we'll start the next week. And, well, that's all.
Next speaker will be Dr. Robert Clarissó, and the title of the paper he will be presenting is On the Verification of UML OCL Class Diagrams Using Constraint Programming.
Well, this is joint work with Jordi Cabot, the iCrea researcher that is going to join UOC soon, and Daniel Riera, both from IT Multimedia and Telecommunication Studies. And well, the talk will be structured in this way. Now we're going to talk about quality assurance in software development. We will start by talking about what is the use that is made in models in the software design and development process. Later on, we'll move specifically about the quality assurance problem in software development. And finally, we'll talk about what is the specific solution that we have proposed, which is based on a paradigm called constraint programming. So first of all, we're going to talk about software, and more precisely about the software design process. So typically, software is not implemented directly. You do not start by producing code in the first day. First, you have to start thinking about what is the functionalities of the system that you want to develop. And in order to achieve that, you start by producing models of this software. What is a model? I wanted to explain it with something useful and important like cats. Everybody says that the internet was invented to exchange pictures of cats. So this is a very important topic. And if you want to explain to someone what is a cat, you will probably use a depiction like this one on the left. That would provide a good image of what is a cat, but however, if you want to do something different, like provide a computer animation of a cat, you will need a different model, something that takes into account the different components of a cat's body. So precisely that is a model. It's a description of a system that takes into account different features depending on the goal that you want to achieve. And the beauty and the power of models is in the abstraction capacity, because a model only includes the relevant information that is needed for that purpose. This means that it can be very simple, and also that it can be reduced, so that if later on you want to talk about tigers instead of cats, maybe you can reuse the same type of model. So in a software system, you might be interested in describing different features of a software system. Like, for example, the one that comes to your mind is the behavior. What is the sequence of events, a sequence of activities that a software system performs? And there are modeling notations that let you do that, like activity diagrams. You might want to describe the information base. So what are the pieces of information that appear in the system? Whether we have students, we have grades, we have courses. And also what are the integrity constraints that appear in this system? Like, for example, each course has a unique code. You might also want to describe what are the different features that relate different families of products of a software system. Like, for example, if you have the free version and you have the professional version, which is paid, and they have different versions, you might want to explain what are the relationships among them. Okay, this is done with type of models called feature models. We are going to focus on the models on the left, what is called UML class diagrams, which describe the information base. What is the information that is being used on a software system? And before moving on how to analyze them, we'd like to discuss why are we using, or what are we using these models for? The first thing that we might want to use these models is for explaining how the system works. For example, if you have a very complex legacy system in a company, you might want to explain how it works so that new employees understand how it operates. This is something called reverse engineering, and typically is done by extracting models from the code base of an old system. You might also want to use the model to check whether your initial idea about how the system should work actually works in practice. So for example, to simulate whether the system operates as expected. Something else that you might want to do, which is more practically oriented, is, well, once you have the model, you might want to get the final implementation of the software system directly by pressing a button and generating the final code of the system. So these might be some of the goals that you may have in mind when analyzing a model, and we're going to focus on verification and validation. And when we are doing that, well, I think I don't need to explain you how important software quality is. It might be something as funny as finding a Windows error, a blue screen of death in a software system. This is not probably a life-threatening error, but in aerospace, energy, or medical scenarios, software systems may be safety critical. So failures in software may cost a lot of money or may cost lives. So it's very important to make sure that software systems are correct. And what do we mean by correct in the sense of a software system? We might be asking two different types of questions. The first one must be, is the model right? Are we building a correct model in the sense that it's well-formed, it does not have syntactic errors, for example, that it is inconsistent, that there are no contradictions. For example, this is a very simple model, this one, and it has one of the typical rookie errors when modeling. It says, you can think of it as saying that a person needs two parents. This might be a very simple integrity constraint, but if you think of it, then if one person needs two parents, then their parents need two parents as well. And you end up needing an infinite number of persons in order to use this software system. So this might be a typical mistake. Or another mistake that you may have is that you may include information that is redundant, is not needed. And this is typically a source in which later on you will find some problems. Another type of questions that you might want to ask about the software system is whether the model that you have defined is the right one. Not if it is correct, but if actually what the user of the software expects. For example, going back to cats, you typically want to model on the information about the system. So for example, a cat has 4 legs, not 2. Also, the model has to be precise. It has to describe reality. So cats have no arm going out of their backs. And also it has to be citable, because typically when you build a software system, you don't want that in the end the client says, no, I did not want a cat, I wanted a tiger. This is something that you would not like to discover at the very last minute. So the questions on the right, they are very hard to analyze automatically by a computer. But on the other hand, the questions on the left, they are feasible to be analyzed by a computer. And how it is done using a computer tool called a formal verification tool, which is given the model that is going to be analyzed and also the correctness property that needs to be checked. Okay? And this tool internally transforms this model into a formal notation and give this notation to a theorem prover or a constraint solver that analyzes this model and provides some feedback. The feedback might be as simple as saying, yes, the property holds or it does not hold, or it might provide more advanced information, such as a proof certificate stating why the model is correct or not, on an example or counterexample where the model exhibits its behavior. So this problem is computationally very complex, and it's not possible to get it right in each and every dimension. So when you are implementing a formal verification tool, you need to establish several trade-offs. So for example, the tool that you're using might not be automated. It may require user assistance to complete the proofs, or it might not be efficient enough. Okay, so there are several dimensions, whether you can cover all the expressivity on a model, whether you can detect all types of faults, and when you create a formal verification tool, you have to decide which of these are going to be your strengths and which are going to be your weaknesses. So in this paper, what we have used is a specific approach to perform this formal verification, which is called constraint programming. Constraint programming is a declarative problem-solving methodology. In what you do is you express the problem in terms of a set of constraints that need to be satisfied. For example, a Sudoku problem might be a very simple example of a constraint problem, in which you have to fill in some gaps according to some constraints. We have used specifically a specific variety of constraint problems called constraint satisfaction problems. in which the problem is decomposed in 3 dimensions. A set of variables that need to take values within a given domain, and a set of constraints that these values need to satisfy. And one specific, another trivial example of this would be the n-queens problem, in which you have to place queens in a chessboard without each threatening each other. This is a very example of a problem that can be decomposed in this way. The contribution of this paper has been using constraint satisfaction problem as the formal notation that we are using to verify models. Okay, we are using a specific constraint solver called Eclipse, which is very efficient and is able to perform this verification and to find errors efficiently. And specifically the contribution of this paper has been being able to encode the rich expressivity of the UML class diagrams into this formal notation. Regarding what are the advantages and disadvantages of this tool, as I have already said, the main advantage is regarding the expressivity of the models that this tool can analyze, the efficiency of the solver that we are using, and finally the type of feedback that we are producing. That is very useful to the designer. On the other hand, we are following what is called a bounded verification approach, so that the answer that we get is inconclusive, so that at some points we might get a I don't know answer from the tool. Okay, so regarding for further work, we are working precisely on how to improve the set of cases in which the designer gets a I don't know answer. So that would be all for my part, and thanks for your attention. This is some further information in case you want some pointers on how to continue in this area of research. Thank you.
The third presenter is Dr. Jordi Casas, and he will be talking about anonymizing graphs, measuring quality for clustering.
Good morning to everyone. So this presentation will be divided into 5 parts. First of all, we'll talk about the motivation. Then we define the information loss measures. Next, we'll explain our experimental framework, and then we go to the results. And finally, we'll talk about the conclusions. Here we can see the scenario in which the owner of the data wants to publicly release his data to researchers and third parties. But he must preserve the user's privacy. And usually most of the anonymization methods are based on adding, removing, or swapping edges in the network. So in this work, we have focused on how to analyze data utility on anonymous data. So we observe that there are several graph mining tasks and too many methods to compute this task. So it's so hard to analyze all of them. So we ask, can we use some generic graph metrics to predict real graph mining tasks? And there are several generic information loss measures which evaluates some graph properties. And we compute the error on this measure using this scheme in which we compare the value of the metric on the original and on the anonymous or perturbed network, and we get simply a score which is the error on this measure. And we analyze several network metrics, average distance, diameter, harmonic mean of the shortest distance, subgraph centrality, transitivity, edge intersection, clustering coefficient, and modularity. All these metrics are evaluated using equation 1, which simply subtracts the score of these metrics, which evaluates the whole network. We also use 2 spectral metrics, which are the largest eigenvalue of the adjacency matrix and the second smallest eigenvalue of the Laplacian matrix, and 2 vertex centrality measures, and we use equation 2 to compute the error on these measures. And then we have focused our graph mining tasks into clustering or community detection task, which is one of the most active graph mining processes recently. So here we start from the original network, and we apply some anonymization or perturbation process to introduce noise in the data. And then we apply the same clustering method both to the original and to the perturbed data. And then we use the precision index to compute the matching between the original and the anonymous clusters. So equation 3 is the precision index, how we compute the matching between the clusters. And we use 6 different clustering and community detection algorithms, which are the Markov cluster algorithm, the Girvan and Newman algorithm, the fast gradient modularity, wall trap, infomap, and multilevel in our experiments. And more or less, this is the framework of our experimental setup. We start from the original network and we apply a perturbation which ranges from 1% to 25% using different edge modification techniques like adding, removing, or swapping edges. And then for each one of these perturbed data sets, we analyze all these generic information loss measures we have seen previously and all the clustering specific information loss measures. And then we try to correlate or to compare these values in order to establish a correlation between them. So first of all, we ask, do the generic information loss measures behave in similar way independently of the data set? And as we can see here, some of them, almost all of them, achieves a strong or very strong correlation with values higher than 0.9. But the spectral measures and the diameter shows a weak or very weak correlation with themselves, which means that they behave in different way according to the data or to the properties of the data. Next, we apply the same experiment to the clustering specific information loss measures, and as we have seen, using 3 of our 6 clustering methods, the results are still a strong correlation, 2 moderate correlations using wall trap and infomap, and Markov clustering algorithms achieves a weak correlation. So in this table we can see the matching, the correlation between all these generic information loss measures and the clustering specific ones. And as we can see, some of them achieves a strong correlation, which means that these measures are able to predict the real data utility in clustering processes. These measures are the most important one, the closeness centrality and clustering coefficient, but also average distance between the centrality, edge intersection, and transitivity are able to predict the real behavior of the data on clustering processes. So next, we try to analyze if more than one generic information loss measures can help us to improve the correlation. So we use a multivariate regression analysis to compute the correlation between an aggregate set of generic information loss measures. And as we can see here, the values are slightly higher, but we are adding some computational cost, which can be good for some cases, but not for all of them. So we can add more than one measure and we will get slightly higher values. And finally, we are interested in proof that our experiments are independently of the data where they are applied. So we applied the experiments in different data sets and try to establish the correlation averaged values and the deviation. And as we can see, the values are more or less the same for all the data sets, which means that the results are consistent over different data sets. In these data sets, for instance, the first one, the Zachary's Karate Club, is a small network, very well known in social science. And the last one, URB-ML, is a network with more or less 10,000 nodes, which is a bigger network with a very different structure, and the values are still more or less the same. So, as a conclusion, well, we have observed that some measures behave in similar way independently of the data in which they are applied. And what is the most important thing in this work, we found a strong correlation between some generic information loss measures, such as closeness centrality, clustering coefficient, edge intersection between the centrality, transitivity, or average distance, and the clustering specific information loss measures. Additionally, we have found that considering more than one metric can help us to get slightly values, but adding some computational cost. And that's all. Thanks for your attention.
Now we proceed to the fourth speaker. Dr. Tony Perez will present RSS and sensor fusion algorithms for indoor location systems on smartphones.
I am going to talk about positioning in indoor environments. So I will show you a little bit about the context, what is indoor positioning, and the two techniques that we will be used, Wi-Fi fingerprinting and sensor fusion. Then the test we developed and our conclusions. Well, the context is that all of you probably know about the importance of position. All of you have very location-based systems in your mobiles and context-aware recommender systems. All of them need location. And about location, there are three things very important: fast coverage, precision, and security. We will talk here only about coverage. Well, outside, it is very easy to position people. Well, easy. We have several GNSS. The more known is Galileo and probably GPS. And they only work outside. Well, but what happened inside? Probably if you want Hansel and Gretel to get lost, you should have to take them inside the building, not outside, because nowadays it is very easy to position outside. And how can we get the position inside? Well, we have many things, many ways to do that, but we have three very important restrictions. We only want to use infrastructures already present in the building. We want to be very easy pass from outside to inside, and also we want an end-user application. An end-user application that have to work in a smartphone without internet connection. Well, why without internet connection? Because if you see the map of Catalonia, for example, you see that the green zones that there is internet coverage are very few. Actually, if you live abroad outside of Barcelona of the high velocity speed trains, you don't have coverage. And what happens if you need an end user? We need an application that has to be very fast because you probably want to stay a long time waiting for the response of the application, and it has to be very easy to use. Well, let's see how can we do indoor positioning. There are many ways. We can use markers, we can use wireless systems, and inertial systems. The markers are not a true indoor positioning system. The markers are, well, you are here. Well, I already knew that. But then we don't use that. So we can use also signal. We have many signal devices, Wi-Fi, RFID, Bluetooth, but signal needs a device to receive the signal. And also the inertial systems that you have a sensor, and with that sensor and that information, only with that, you are able to get positioning. Well, let's see what will we use. Well, markers at a fake, then we will use it. That we will use wireless. And which wireless? Wi-Fi, because there are already the sensors of Wi-Fi. And inertial systems. All of them, things that we can find in every smartphone. So, how can we get positioning with Wi-Fi? With Wi-Fi fingerprinting. It has the more common way to use it, and there are two steps in doing that: calibration and location. For making the calibration, you have to go with your smartphone to take a run of all the building and take signals of every single point. In every single point, you will find a lot of Wi-Fis, and with a level of every Wi-Fi. You can take the signal several times. You take apply the formula. We use mathematics, of course, and then you can make the mean and the standard deviation. After that, you take only the more stable Wi-Fi signals. You don't take all of them. And after that, since you want a very fast application, you take only some of them, some of the measures you took. Well, then you could build the calibration matrix, and with this thing, make it in every single point, you can get the map of signals of your building. Then the next step is to make the location. The location is exactly the same. You take the signal in every single point, and after that, you compare. It doesn't work. Sorry, because it is a technical. And after that, you compare with all the places with the same signals. But only when you find the same the same access point. After that, you calculate the distance, but the distance not with the position, but with the signal level. So actually, it is not a true distance. And only of those points we have the same node. After that, you renormalize to take into account how many access points you use, and then, like a mean, you take the position. So then we were able to take the position with Wi-Fi. Let's see sensor fusion. Sensor fusion uses two sensors of the smartphone, accelerometer and magnetometer. Well, you know this formula probably. Well, all of you know this formula. Is the Newton formula of acceleration, and it is very useful, this formula, because when some barbarians talk about the utility of kinematics and Galilean physics, you can show this and show that this is useful to make location with smartphones. So it doesn't need more explanations, but if you apply Galilean physics, Galilean physics is not actually Galilean physics, you can talk a lot about that, but you can get the position only with a secondary formula. You know probably all these formulas, and after that you have a problem, because you can have your smartphone in many ways. People go with a smartphone in this way. Well, then you have to put the smartphone in the appropriate way. But we don't want users to do that. So there is a change of coordinate system that you can go from the reference system of the smartphone to the reference system of Earth. And after that, combining the accelerometer with the magnetometer and getting the orientation of the smartphone, you can get how can move the smartphone within Earth. Well, we have two systems to position indoor. Well, have we managed to get indoor positioning? Let's see. We made two tests. RSS and sensor fusion. We made the test with a common smartphone, and we first of all made the test in a flat, in a 120 quadrat meter flat in the center of Barcelona from a Becarian. So it is curious. But in all of the tests we made, we use 40 nodes, and we don't want to use more nodes because if we use more nodes, the application will be slower, and we don't want that. And after that, we have made 100 tests. Well, in a flat, we get a precision of 1.5 meters. But when we go to RSS test in Mediatek, 1,600 quadrat meter, then precision is slower because we have less nodes. So this is a problem, but it's actually a first approximation to our positioning. But what happens with sensor fusion? Well, it is absolutely fake. It is absolutely failure because sensors within the smartphone are of very low quality. So we are not able to get a very good position. It is actually can be done, but with better sensors. Well, so then actually from our tests, the only way to get our positioning within a smartphone is using Wi-Fi fingerprinting from the test we made. So our conclusion is that we have able to make an RSS and sensor fusion technique to get positioning. We have been able to get a good precision within small buildings. We are still working a lot in high buildings. Actually, we have a problem with sensor fusions. And what is important, I want you to note, is that all the techniques are totally within the smartphone and have the answer in less than 5 seconds. Well, if you work with your smartphone, you will see that 5 seconds is a long time. But more than the 5 seconds is a still longer time. So 5 seconds is pretty good. But what are we working now? We are working in getting better position. Of course, we want a precision of 1 millimeter. It is our goal. It is difficult, but you have to get good position, good goals. And we are working actually a lot in Z positioning. That it is actually a field that is totally new, and it is not still solved. So thank you very much, and hope you liked.
Next presenter will be Paul Arias, who will present the work Routing Fleets with Multiple Driving Ranges. Is it possible to use greener fleet configurations?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Arias. I'm going to present this work, which is a collaboration with Angela Juan from the IN3 of the UOC, Jarrod Gonsel from the MIT, and Tolga Bektas from the University of Southampton. This is the content of my presentation. I'm going to go through the context and motivation, why we do this problem, why we tackle this problem. An introduction of the vehicle routing problem, which is the main base problem that we're going to solve. I'm going to go further in my problem and explain what's heterogeneous and what's green VRP, what's the green vehicle routing problem. Then I'm going to explain more or less how we solve it. I'm not going to go in deep in the process, but I'm going to more or less try to explain it graphically. And then some results that we achieved, and finally the conclusions and future research. Why we do this problem? Why we chose this problem? Well, you know, companies nowadays want to go greener because there's this environmental problem, and then the companies need to improve their technologies. In our case, we're tackling the routing problem. How can we go greener in a routing problem? Well, you know, we want to reduce this carbon footprint. It's very important in these environmental problems that we have nowadays. Also, there is the cost risk of the fuel. You know that there's a lot of uncertainty in the fuel. It can rise a lot or it can go down. Now it's down. Hopefully, it's going to stay there a while. Then we have these new government subsidies that we get for the companies to get greener. And also, the advances in these technologies make it possible for companies to make this step, to go further and get greener. But what's the problem? Why companies don't do this? Because we have these two kinds of vehicles, the ignition ones, the normal ones that we drive every day, and also the hybrid ones, for example, that nowadays some people use it a lot. They have unlimited distance range. So you can drive as far as you want because you can refuel in any station. But what happens with electric vehicles? Electric vehicles, you do a route, you run out of electricity, and then what? You don't have that many stations that you can refuel electricity, and also you need time to refuel this car. So this is the main problem that we encounter in tackling this problem. So can we do this in a way that the companies can use greener vehicles? We will see. What's the vehicle routing problem, and what's the rich vehicle routing problem, which is a step further on this basic problem? Well, the vehicle routing problem is a combinatorial problem. It has been studied a lot since 1959. You have a set of customers that you want to serve using a fleet of vehicles, and what happens when you have more constraints, more real-life constraints instead? Then you have the rich VRP problem, which we studied with Jose Cáceres. I don't know if he is here today. That adds real constraints to this basic problem. For example, in our case, heterogeneous, green VRP, open routes, which you can end in any of the customers, pick up and delivery, and so on. There's a lot of new constraints that you can add, and it gets difficult and difficult and difficult. What's our problem, though? We have heterogeneous and green. What we mean by heterogeneous? Heterogeneous is that you have a different fleet of vehicles. In our case, we have electric vehicles, ignition vehicles, internal combustion engine, and hybrid vehicles. What we mean with green VRP, we want to take into account this greener aspect of this vehicle routing problem by having these electrical vehicles that you can only use in certain distances. This helps in the fuel consumption because you only have electricity then, and then the electric engines, you know, it's all is more environmentally friendly. Also, what's the objective of this problem, of our problem in this case? We want to minimize the distance cost of using the greenest configuration, the distance cost with how can we optimally do a route by minimizing the distance. We have here an abstract of what, mathematically speaking, this problem looks. This is a small part. It's long and long and long, and it's really difficult, so I'm not going to go through it. But yeah, it is quite difficult to understand. Also, how we solve it. There's quite a lot of different ways to solve this problem, but with Angel, they did this kind of algorithm that takes step by step. You have the whole problem first. You're going to have, the first step of all, you have these 2 ignition vehicles and 3 electric vehicles. How do we solve this problem when we have all these nodes in the number 1 and these 5 vehicles? Well, first we take all the routes that we can do with only the ignition ones that don't have this distance restriction. And then you solve it optimally and you have these routes. And then you take the longest ones that you can choose out of all the solution. Once you have optimized the long range vehicles, you go to the next step, which is you subtract the nodes that you already have put into use, and then you have these 3 electric vehicles that you haven't used yet. So what do? You optimally solve this problem by putting these nodes to each vehicle. You can see that they are like smaller routes than the ones before. And then finally, you just put together the 2 problems that you solved, and you have the final optimal solution, which can be seen in here. This problem, what we achieved with this? Well, down there, you can see all the table of results that I'm not going to say, but we have really good results. Even we beat some benchmarks that nowadays circulate on the internet. But for us, the main point of this work is how can you improve the greener aspect of this problem? We have this green rank that we said we had. For example, you know that in the first picture you have 180. This means you have 1 electric vehicle, 1 hybrid one, and 0, for example, ignition ones. And then when you are changing this configuration, you go greener, because the more electric vehicles you use, the better it is. And sometimes, if you use 1 ignition one, but you use more electrical ones, it's still better, environmentally friendly. But the interesting point is that the cost of using greener configurations doesn't increase that much. So we don't lose, actually, that many distance costs between the benchmarks that they don't use green configurations and us that we use green configurations. So we think that this point is really important because we have this decision-making tool that you can choose different configurations and see, okay, I have this number of vehicles, should I use this configuration, how it affects the cost, and so on. In conclusion, I think we support the fact that we can use these hybrid and electric vehicles in the routing problem. I think also that the solutions are quite attractive enough for, I hope that in the future some companies might use it because it really helps. I think it's an important aspect of our day-to-day life to improve the environment as much as we can. And also, but we want to go further in our research and do the carbon footprint aspect. How to monetarily calculate the impact of our savings by using electric vehicles and not ignition vehicles. Also, there's this topography impact that we can explore. Some cars cannot drive some routes. Electric cars don't have the power to drive that far or with that many weight on them. And I hope in the near future we can just publish some more about it. Well, finally, I'm going to say that this research has led us to publish two papers in 2 really good journals, both in quartile 1, and I hope our group with Angel, we are going to continue publishing much and better. I hope you like the presentation. Thank you very much for listening, and Angel.
Now we move to the final presentation in this first session of the showcase. It will be given by Dr. Deema Rodriguez with the title, Another Look at Being There, Experiences in Digital Media, Exploring Connections of Telepresence with Mental Imagery.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for being here today. to hear about an article on being their experiences in digital media. I would like to offer just a short overview on this article, which will start with a very quick background. It was December 2010, and I was in Oxford as part of our research stay at the Oxford Internet Institute. Christmas holidays were fast approaching, and so it was a huge snowstorm. Many people, many Brits, were trapped in bus stations, on trains. Many supermarkets stopped delivering their groceries. Heathrow was closed, and the University of Oxford decided to close also its facilities. So what do you do when you don't have almost anything to do? Well, in my case, I decided to open an account on Facebook. And there, it was fun. It was really fun. To my surprise, I found a bunch of former schoolmates. We share terrible old pictures. We try to figure out what do we like today. And this naturally led to organize a school reunion. I tried to rationalize those feelings, and the first concept that came to my mind was the concept of presence. Presence has been extensively studied by researchers from the field of human-computer interaction. And it has been described as an appealing, a very positive feeling that led the person, led the user to feel inside the virtual environment, being there, right there. Presence is usually understood by this line of research as a perception. And usually, any other inner process is just ignored or rejected and not included into the equation. So I thought that maybe imagination has something to do with these feelings. And this led me to came up with the concept of imagery. Imagery is a very well-known concept by psychologists and educators. It has also been used to explain why certain marketing communication programs are able to raise in consumers their imagination. They imagine themselves using the product that is advertised. And these kind of marketing communication programs are very, very effective. And imagery has been also used to study hedonic consumption and those experiences that transport individuals to pure imaginal, pure fiction worlds. Thanks to books, films, and readings. So I felt inspired to write a paper on all of this and try to connect these distinct lines of research, presence research and imagery research, and try to build some bridges between these two lines of research that had been ignoring each other so far. I would say that I would like to show today just two contributions of this paper. The first of this contribution is a new definition of presence feelings that integrates, that brings into the equation the concept of imagery and presence feelings as an outcome, as a form, as a result of presence of imagery processes. And the second and last contribution that we would like to highlight today is a picture of presence feelings along an equation of imagery. In the left extreme of this continuum, we can place those presence feelings that let us to feel placed in situations evoked by the digital media that are very realistic, that those evoked by these horrible pictures that I mentioned at the very beginning, that lets us to feel surrounded by actual real people that you have truly met. And in the middle of this continuum, we may have feelings of being placed in the digital media related to situations that haven't happened yet, but it's very possible that they will happen, as this school reunion that I mentioned. And on the other extreme, on the left and last extreme of the continuum, we may have those presence feelings that let us placed in pure mental domains, in pure fantastic domains, interacting with amazing characters that are created through the contents, are evoked through the contents presented on the digital media. Thank you so much. I will be, of course, delighted to talk about this later on. Thank you.
We're starting the second block of talks now. We'd like to encourage you to take notes with your questions and comments so you can approach the speakers during the coffee break. The next talk is by Dr. David Massip, who will be presenting the article Automated Prediction of Preferences Using Facial Expressions.
Okay, thank you. My name is David Massip. I'm going to present my work at Automatic Prediction of Preferences Using Facial Expressions, done with in Princeton University with my friends Alex Todorov and Dina Horsson and Michael North from Columbia. Well, I will start the presentation introducing the problem we are tackling here, which is reading minds from others' facial expressions, and then I will devote the rest of the presentation to lower the expectations and come back to the real world, and I will start detailing the state of the art on this topic. I will explain the methods we developed to test our hypothesis, and then I will introduce the results and some conclusions. Well, this is the marketing slide, so don't believe too much about what I want to say. The idea is that we want to deal with the topic that whether we can read others' mind, but just looking at their faces, okay? Obviously, the answer to this question is no, not at all, but the answer should be maybe not completely at least, because we continuously read information from others' faces. We infer the emotional states from our friends just looking at their faces for a few seconds, and this information is very important in our everyday life. And what we want to propose here is try to predict a specific setting of this information that we extract from others' faces, which is what we call preferences. I will define later what preferences mean for us, okay? And actually, as a computer scientist, we are interested in exploring whether computers can make the same predictions in the machine using a single laptop and a webcam. Let's go to the detailed problem of facial expressions. Facial expressions have been studied since many years ago. Even the ancient Greeks studied facial expressions in their texts. And actually, many people ignore it, but Charles Darwin had a secondary research line, which was the analysis of facial expressions in humans. There is an important book from Charles Darwin related to this topic. Okay, and maybe the most important researcher in the last years, in the recent years, dealing with this topic is Paul Ekman, a psychologist, that defined the universal set of emotions that we share in the human world. Okay, he traveled a lot. He found a lot of cultures, and he found that these 6 emotions are universal. All the cultures, even some people living in Papua New Guinea in the jungle, share this set of emotions. Okay, this fear, anger, sadness, disgust, joy, and surprise. And actually, as a computer scientist, we need the computers to learn these emotions because we want the computers to interact with us in a more human way. Okay, so this has many applications in computer science. To go more into details, maybe the best contribution of Ekman was the definition of the FACS, the Facial Action Coding System. Ekman studied the movement of the muscles of the human face, and he found that there are 46 atomic units, atomic movements called action units, and any emotion that we can express can be represented as a weighted, as a linear combination of these action units. Okay? Actually, this has many applications because facial expressions, it has been shown in many studies that can predict the results of the negotiation, even the winner of elections or the election of our partner. So our goal here in this work is to apply computer vision algorithms to model user preferences in these non-poster scenarios. And now I'm going to define what preference means to us. Let's see if I'm lucky and this works. Okay, the video doesn't work, as expected. No problem. No, because in PowerPoint these things happen. Let's see the face of this man, okay? This man is looking at two cartoons. And my question for you, okay, he's moving the face, he's making some sort of expression. And let's look to the second video. And my question for you is going to be, which cartoon was funnier for that man? Reproducir. Maybe it's somewhere else, okay? Which cartoon was funnier for that man? Probably, if you look at the end of the video, you will see that the second video was a little bit more funny because there is this subtle smile at the end of the video, okay? So this is what we understand for a preference problem. We show people two stimuli, and they have to choose one stimuli, and we have to infer which stimuli they choose just looking at their face. No sound, whatever, okay? Just with a few seconds. So we designed an experiment jointly with my friends in Princeton, and we took 4 categories: people, cartoons, animal, and paintings, and we show 8 students a couple of pictures. Okay, for instance, this painting, and then this painting, each one for 3 seconds. And the student had to choose which one was more beautiful according to his opinion. We did the same for the cartoons. The student read the cartoon, understood it, and then read the second cartoon, and just selected the one that was funnier according to his opinion, okay? The students weren't aware of it, but behind the screen there was a hidden camera, and we were recording the face of the student, okay? And then, in a second phase, in a second step, we took these videos, the recording of the faces, and we showed these videos to 56 new students from Princeton, okay? And we asked these new students which was the opinion of the first set of students, okay? So we wanted to see if humans can infer these preferences just looking at the faces of their friends. And this is from psychology, and I'm a computer scientist, so what I'm trying to do is the same thing, but in the machine. I took these videos from the first set, and I tried to infer whether computers can also guess or predict this preference, okay? So for this purpose, we designed a computer program that first, I will not go into details here, but it detects the face, it centers the face on the image, and then it fits a mesh on the face. This mesh actually is dynamic. You can see it here. So this mesh is moving with the facial muscles. And then we take this mesh and a set of landmarks that are around this mesh. We compute the displacement of these landmarks with respect to the center of the face, and we train a classifier. Okay? These are our features, our classifier. And these are the results of what we obtain. We obtain better than chance accuracies in 2 categories, people and cartoons. And what is more important, our accuracies are very close to human accuracy. This row here is the human accuracy in the same setting, and we are really close in a lot of cases. Okay? And this is the second approach we did to tackle the same problem. This is a little bit more sophisticated. For those who are not familiar with machine learning, it's going to sound strange. The idea is that we took again the distances from all these landmarks to the center of the image. We construct a high-dimensional vector from this information, and we train an SVM. SVM is the Super Vectors Machines Classifier. It's a standard in machine learning. And again, we try to predict this preference from the videos, and we obtained improved results. Okay? So, conclusions. We are trying to develop a new technology to detect subtle emotions, not the classic 6 emotions from Ekman. This is a hard problem because the emotions are very subtle, and the movements and the face dynamics are complex to model. The question that we were posing at the beginning, can we read minds from facial expression? If we lower the expectations in this narrow binary preference selection problem, probably we can. Okay? And this has many applications that go beyond this preference selection problem. For instance, this can be applied to depression monitorization, pain detection, deception or lie detection, dynamically pricing the advertising depending on how people react to the ads, autism, and actually there are companies like Sony, Yahoo, Motorola, and Verizon that are putting a lot of money on this research topic, okay? I would like to end this talk with the last sentence of the paper from the publication from my friend Dan Hoskerson that highlights the importance of doing interdisciplinary research in this area of psychology, between psychology and computer science. Okay, and that's it.
Hello, good morning everyone. My name is Amna Qureshi. I am here to present
Our next speaker is Dr. Julia Minguillon, presenting the article Rethinking Dropout in Online Higher Education, the case of the Universitat Oberta de Catalunya.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I will present this work that has been done with Josep Grau, and it's part of his PhD on this topic. I will start my talk with the concept of rethinking dropout in the context of an online higher education. We will first quantify the problem, and then we will try to explain the difference between taking a break or dropping out. Then we will explain the model we have used for modeling dropout using enrollment patterns, and also the evidences from data we have using data from UOC. And finally, we will see the conclusions of the main conclusions of our work and the current and future work we are doing on this topic. So, how do we define dropout in an open university? We need to first quantify the problem, and then in the case of an institution like ours, explaining the difference between taking a break or dropping out. You know that as an open university, we don't have very strong enrollment requirements. On the contrary, they are very lax. So you can just come here, take a break, take a subject or two, then take a break, then come back, etc. And we are trying to analyze this. So these are our students making a line in front of our university in order to enroll for their first semester. But then what happens when they finish the first semester? 27%, almost 28% of the students get into a blackout and they don't come back. And we are trying to analyze this situation. And this situation, well, I don't need you to explain why it's important, but of course it has a very important economic and social cost. And as an open university, even these figures are not really bad, real bad when we compare them with other universities, and especially with other online universities, and they are not good. So we are trying to analyze what's going on. So, using the data, the most recent data we have from degrees in Catalan, from after using the Bologna, well, the European Higher Education Area framework, from the first semester from 2008 till the last semester previous to the current one that we are finishing now. If we take only all the students that we have, at least for them, the first and the second enrollment, that is these 37,000 students, we can see that 27.84% of them take a break after their first semester. In fact, some of them, most of them re-enroll in the second semester, and as you can see, we have 15 students that after the first semester get their degree because they come here to finish previous studies. This is not a mistake, but it's an atypical situation, but not uncommon. But what if we take a look to a longer period, in this case, 4 academic semesters? We can see that the number of students taking a break is more or less the same percentage in the second semester, 28%, but that from these students, this amount of students, only 9.63% come back and become active in the third semester. This is the difference between taking a break and dropping out. We want to be able to see if we can differentiate those students according to their behavior and try to explain why are they doing that, that is dropping out or taking a break, and at the same time trying to design some actions for preventing dropping out and for improving waking up these sleeping students. The bad figure in this graphic is the last one, and as you can see, after the fourth semester, we have almost the same number of students taking a break than active. And this is dangerous because dropout is a highly accumulative phenomenon, and we have to fight it. So this is one of the evidences we have that this problem is a real one, a tough one. So, how we have analyzed all this data? We have used enrollment patterns and evidences from data. What we have done is putting all the students aligned starting from their first semester, using all data as if they were students in the first semester at the same moment. And we have seen, for example, we can see that we have a student with 3 consecutive semesters, so they enroll in the first and the second and the third semester. Maybe we have another student taking a break the second semester and coming back in the third and the fourth, etc., etc. And what we are doing here is trying to analyze how many semesters do we need to wait before we can say that this is a dropout or this is taking a break. If we use the data from the paper that is in the paper that comes from not the Bologna process but the degrees in the previous model, we can see that if we only accept an error of 1%, N can range from 5 to 12, and that's too much. We don't want to expect to wait 12 semesters to say that somebody is a dropout. If we accept an error of 5%, this goes from 3 to 5, that it's more or less 2-3 years. But if we accept an error of 10%, N it's like 2 or 3, in most cases 2. One of the problems we have detected is that reproducing the experiments in the paper using the current data, we have seen that N can be as low as 1. So even after 1 semester, we can almost say with a 90% of accuracy that one student is going to drop out. So what we are doing, what we have apported with or showed with this paper, we don't need to use the official dropout definition. We can tailor a definition specific for our needs. There is a small window that only with 2 or 3 semesters, we can be really sure that one student is going to drop out or taking a break. Recent data shows that taking a break is almost the same as dropping out. That this is really important because it means that we can, even if this is a bad situation, it also means that we can act in the very first moment that we know that the student is taking a risk. That means the second semester. And as I said, enrollment patterns show that dropout is a decaying phenomenon, but it's highly accumulative, so it's a real problem. So what we are doing now with Josep, well, we are using N equal to 2 in order to define the students as dropouts, and using this information, we are trying to build predictive models with all the information we have from these students in the first semester. So we are using their background, their enrollment data, their navigational interaction patterns, the formative evaluation they are following, and their academic performance. And we are trying to build well, decision trees and other models in order to predict if a student will be a dropout or not using this data. But we have also seen that using just 1 semester for determining if a student is going to be a dropout or taking a break, we can perform some actions in the second semester. So we have created a survey for asking students why are they taking a break in the second semester, and we can, with the results of this survey, we expect to have some actions that the UOC can take in order to wake up these through breaks and not allowing them to become dropouts. And I will take advantage of this position now, and I want to say that we have a special interest group in dropout at UOC. Probably you already know that, but if you are interested in participating in this special interest group, please let me know, and you will be very welcome. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Dr. Deema Rodriguez with the article, What Leads People to Keep on E-Learning? An Empirical Analysis of Users' Experiences and Their Effects on Continuance Intention.
Okay, thank you very much again. Let's go over to this presentation prepared along with our colleague Tony Massaguet, who is seated there. Thank you very much, Tony. And this is an article focused on understanding individuals' experiences within our particular context, within our virtual campus. and it includes an empirical test. We were particularly concerned on better understanding why people keep studying here while continuing on in learning, and on studying also what improves, what helps them to be good students. And the first theoretical framework that we thought we needed to take into account to study these criterion variables, and particularly this one, continuous intention, was the so-called TAM model. TAM model is a very well-known model for those researchers interested in explaining why people decide to adopt a new technology or an innovation. For the first time, once this person has already started to use it and decided to keep using it. And it has been shown that is very that has a great explicative power of these users' decisions in many different contexts. Basically, a TAM model explains those users' decisions on the basis of their attitudes, the positive attitudes towards that innovation or that technology. And in turn, it explains that these positive attitudes depends basically on their perceptions, their personal perceptions about the innovation or the technology, and considers just two types of perceptions: how easy the technology or the innovation is to use, and how useful it is. TAM model also considers determinants of these perceptions. But in many, many studies, and there are thousands of them, in many studies, the only factors considered here as determinants of users' perceptions are technological features related to that innovation or that technology. But we thought that rather than considering technology features, we should consider features related to our model, to our education model. That's why we choose as possible determinants of these perceptions the quality of our didactic materials and the positive attitude of faculty members and instructors. But we thought that even though, as I mentioned, TAM model has a great explicative power, we should consider other elements, put other elements into the equation. What about the pleasure that you can get when studying? What about feeling motivated by yourself to study? Not only by external benefits that you can get and you capture very well with this kind of model. And this led us to take into consideration the construct of flow. Flow is a concept directly imported from the psychology field, and it has been extensively used by educators and psychologists to explain why some people and how some people excel so well in many different activities, including the arts, including sports, including research, and including, of course, academic activities. What is flow? What does it mean? By flow, we mean a psychological episode that that led the person to lose self-consciousness, to lose track of time, and plunge themselves into the activity at hand. But I think that the better way to explain what flows means can be very complex. Could be a very short video. Okay, so this is, I think, a good description about flow episodes. So we felt compelled to include flow in our model. And apart from this, of course, we thought that presence feelings should be also inside the model. We tested the model, and for this we gathered information about our own students. We collected around 2,500 questionnaires. We matched this data with objective data from our registrar's office. Of course, for the online questionnaire, we just use very well validated scales that we adapted for our particular context. The measurement model was fully validated, as well as the structural model by using structural equation modeling. All the causal paths were validated, and so this brings strong support to the theoretical model. To conclude, I would like to offer three main findings of this paper. First, we show that rather than technological futures, educative elements, pillar elements of our model, of our education model, trigger truly relevant individuals' experiences in learning. We show the paramount importance of faculty members and instructors in triggering flow experiences and presence feelings. And finally, we show for the first time in literature that that regardless the positive attitude of our students to our education model, to our system, if they feel inside, if they feel that they are taking part of an actual education community, they keep with us. So thank you very much.
And the last talk for this block will be Dr. Marc Romero, presenting the article La construcción colaborativa de proyectos como metodología para adquirir competencias digitales.
I will present research that has been developed by my colleagues, Maria Pérez Mateo, Teresa Romeo, and myself. As you can see in the title, one of the principal aim of our research was to analyze the students' perception about how a methodology, collaborative methodology can help them to acquire digital competences. It has been published in Comunicar, Comunicar magazine that you can see the link. First of all, I would like to make a very brief introduction on the research scenario. The researchers that developed this study form part of the EduLab research group, and this research is an applied research. What does, in our case, the applied research means? In our case, it means that we are developing our research in our educational practice. In that case, we developed this research in the subject called ICT competences. It's a transversal subject that is developed in 12 degrees of the university and has an average of impact of 5,500 students per year. This subject helps students to acquire two main competences of work. One of them is use and application of ICT in professional and academic environments, and the second one, teamwork. Sorry, I thought that it will be bigger, but I can explain a little to you. That are the competences that are worked in our subject, and it's highlight the teamwork, because being and analyzing a collaborative methodology is the core competence that is analyzed in that research. Our theoretical framework, as you can imagine, analyzing methodology that is collaborative, is the core of our theoretical framework is online collaboration. Being aware that in our society is very important collaboration, and it's boosted by the internet technologies, we have been developing several researches during the years on that field. Here we just underline some of the most important ones. The first three that has the same name, that means collaborative learning and work in virtual environments, were founded by WOC. And the last one, the most recent one, is a thematic net that was found by the Ministry of Education, called Net of Collaborative Learning in Virtual Environments. we have 3 more satellites of that core of the theoretical framework that are digital competence. That is, we understand digital competence that more than the use of ICT. It's the use of ICT with a more critical point of view. And we are basing on the last tendencies of the European Commission in that matter. The second one, the PBL, is the project-based learning, is the part of the theoretical framework that gives us the application part, because it's the methodology in which, on which our subject is based. And the third one, social media, we understand that the Web 2.0 tools help students to develop a more active role in their learning process and help them to develop collaborative knowledge. So it's a very important part of our research. Just briefly, I will explain the design of our research. As I said, the principal aim of this research was to analyze a student's perception about how students understand this methodology help them to acquire the digital competences. It's an evaluative research. That means that it's a research that helps us to improve our educational practice. And we use a mixed method, both quantitative and qualitative data gathering tools. It's based on 2 principal phases. The first one, we developed an online questionnaire that was completed once at the final of the subject. And there was some questions about the competences of the course and the methodology. The object of this first questionnaire was to rethink our methodology. We wanted to evolve our methodology to give answer to our students' needs. And the sample of this questionnaire was completed for 720 students, so it's a big sample. And then, using that data, we evolved our methodology. As you can see at the bottom of the slide, this is a representation of the methodology of the subject, that is based on project-based learning, and we call that the collaborative digital project, because students develop a project collaboratively and in digital. This is the stages that I won't explain that, but you can read it in the paper. And the new method, the improved methodology, was implemented in 3,183 students. And then, in the second phase, we designed another questionnaire that was completed by 1,167 students. And we wanted to analyze the institutional survey. I will go briefly to the results of the research. You can read it in the paper, but we will highlight only two results. First of all, as you can see, it was a comparison between two courses, 2009 and 10 and 2011 and 12, and it was analyzed regarding the usefulness of the methodology in order to acquire the competences. As you can see, the improved methodology increased significantly the perception of the student about that. So they think that project-based learning has increased the acquisition of digital competences. And regarding the comments of some of the students in the qualitative part of the study, they think that this methodology helps them to give response to their needs in order to use ICT in their studies at work. The second and last result, as you can see, is there I highlight all the competences of the subject, but we wanted to highlight only two that were more rated. You can see that they were rated by a scale of low, medium, high. All has a very high rating, but these two are more highlighted because It was, as I said, a collaborative methodology that was a collaboration skills online, and in that methodology, the attitudes are very important, so it's reflected in the results as well. Finally, because I think I'm not going on time, the conclusions and prospects, as you can see, you will be able to see in the paper, there are more conclusions, but there are three basic and more important ones. The first of all is that we develop a methodology that integrates the collaborative and collaborative learning and the use of ICT. As I said, this methodology was high-rated and well considered by our students, so we can see that we improved successfully our methodology. 75 students have a positive perception with respect of the acquisition of this competence thanks to the improved methodology. And in this methodology is very important the monitoring of the teacher and the guidance during the different phases of the methodology. So teacher interventions have been identified as a key element to reinforce that process of acquisition of competences. And finally, very briefly and very quick, the lines of further work. Some of them, there are more, but the most important are that we wanted to validate the proposal of the accurate and digital competence of the subject. That is something that we will do in a further research. Carry out a longitudinal study of cases, because we want to know how they will be developing during their studies the acquisition of the competences, determine the level of the transfers of the digital competences at the end of the degree, and finally, a more open use of the products of the students, because they don't reuse the projects that they finish in the subject, so it could be interesting. So, and with that, thank you for your attention, and that's all.
Hello, everybody. Let's proceed to the third group of presentations. Well, the first paper has been published in Sex Roles Journal, but it doesn't talk about the famous 50 Shades. I'm sorry, we'll have to wait until Friday. Dr. Mila Sainz from Gentic Group will present gender stereotypes and attitudes towards information and communication technology professionals in a sample of Spanish secondary students.
Thank you, Josep, and thank you everybody for being here. And I also would like to thank my co-authors, Julio Meneses, Beatriz Lopez, and Sergi Fabregues, for having published this work with me. And the rationale of the paper that we have recently published is related to the low representation of women in ICT professions, such as computer science and engineering telecommunications. And as far as we know, adolescents make certain decisions when they are in secondary education that are very much based on the stereotypes that they have about the different occupations that they could choose in the future, and the inaccurate information that they have conditions these choices. So also we know that from the literature that adolescents choose occupations that are reflective of their own personality and that coincide with their self-image. So we also know that gender differences emerge when students have to choose the different itineraries and different choices during secondary school. For example, when they go for technological bachillerato or bachillerat or humanities bachillerat. So according to the theory of social roles, the distribution of the labor, the different roles that are assigned to men and women condition the different aspirations that they have, and of course the expectations that adolescents have, and when they have to choose the different possibilities, future possibilities they have. And some of these choices are very much conditioned and very much influenced by these the stereotypical portrayals they have about who develop certain, what type of people develop certain jobs, and what type of characteristics they may have in order to do the jobs, to properly perform the jobs. So according to the multi-component theory of gender stereotypes, if we look at, for example, the typical portrayal of a computer scientist, an IT professional, people normally refer to the person, the professional physical features, such as, for example, the glasses the person wears, the way the person, the clothes the person wears, and the outfit they have, or the outlook, the look they have. So they also refer to certain personality characteristics, such as their intelligence or their intellectual aptitudes, such as, for example, how intelligent computer scientists are and how brilliant they are. And also related to these personality traits, people and students refer to the social skills that these professionals may have. So, such as, for example, it's very typical that a lot of research show that many young people think that computer scientists lack of social skills. So these portrayals obviously influence the choices that girls and boys make, and mostly as normally this portrayal of the stereotypical person doing IT is is congruent with male gender roles, normally discourage girls to choose this career or this profession because it doesn't fit with their own self-image. Okay, so these characteristics of the characteristics that I have mentioned about the different people holding a particular profession could have a negative or a positive appraisal by the different people that think about them. And also, if we use the use of language that people make when they refer to the different characteristics that the typical person has, the use of the language tells us that given that, for example, Spanish and Catalan language have grammatical gender, that the characteristics are more these characteristics that try to define the person, typical person doing ICT are normally based on masculine traits. So taking this into account, we ran content analysis of an open-ended question of the responses to an open-ended question. What type of person comes to mind when you think about someone working in ICT? And 900 students, secondary students, at the end of 4th of ESO responded, and we trained two independent coders in order to identify in the students' responses the presence of absence of different characteristics that were extracted from the literary review. So also they had to identify whether these characteristics involve negative, positive, or neutral appraisals, and whether these characteristics were masculine, feminine, or neutral. So regarding the results, most of the characteristics associated with the typical person doing ICT were related to role models, to particular people who were mostly men, and also then to the people, the person, intellectual aptitudes, and also in third place, they referred to the several professions that produce and design ICT, such as computer science or telecommunications engineering. Then they also, mostly girls in this case, they refer to professions that use ICT as a tool for developing their, or for performing their job. And finally, they also refer to certain aspects related to the professional social skills and the professional social position, such as, for example, saying that the ICT professional earned a lot of money or have very expensive cars. So, contrary to our expectations, all these characteristics associated with the different professionals were mostly positively evaluated, more than, as we expected, negatively evaluated. Mostly, there were differences in gender differences in the sense that boys were more likely than girls to evaluate negatively ICT professionals' physical appearance. This is very interesting. And in line with expectations, both girls and boys regard the different characteristics associated with ICT professionals as neutral and masculine rather than as feminine. There were very few feminine references to the different perceptions that students have when thinking about ICT professionals. So the implications of this research are a lot, and we can just briefly mention that, well, if this research shows something that has happened very frequently is about the historical production or reproduction of power and status in technological fields in our context, as well as with feminine forms of ICT occupations. And we should take into consideration that if many decision-making related positions are related to technological occupations and ICT studies, if women are not there, well, they will continue having a secondary role in this field, and they won't participate in the decision-making process of designing and producing as well ICT products. So, and also we have to try to prevent that women are stigmatized and are somehow considered as lacking technological skills. So thank you very much, and I hope that you have enjoyed the presentation.
Next paper is about innovation processes, but she is not an economist, so most of us probably will learn something useful. Dr. Gemma San Cornelio will present the paper Co-Creation and Participation as a Means of Innovation in New Media, an analysis of creativity in the photographic field.
I will introduce this paper also on behalf of my colleague Edgar Gomez, who is working right now at the University of Leeds. But as I will explain, in the context of an origin of this paper, he was working here. He was doing his PhD project, being supervised by Elisenda Ardebo, and he was also part of the research project that it's the context of this presentation. So, firstly, this paper is the result of putting together two different interests. Firstly, was my own personal interest in theorizing the notion of co-creation, specifically in the field of new media. As part of this project, and that was, the origin was in 2011, and I was kind of obsessed of having this neutral or objective definition of co-creation. Now I realize that it wasn't so important, but at that moment I thought so. So that was on the one hand, and on the other, we had the work that Edgar had done in his PhD project that was an ethnographic research on a collective of photographers in Barcelona, but that were sharing experiences, pictures in Flickr. And this was part also of the project, as we considered this collective could be potentially or actually a co-creative process. And thirdly, we wanted to add a third layer to the project, introducing the notions of innovation and creativity in this theorization. So this is a very theoretical paper. I'm sorry about that. Maybe it's not so aligned with other presentations, but it's a kind of theoretical encounters. And firstly, of course, we were looking at definitions of co-creation, highlighting some ideas like the fact that consumers are being participative, making and circulating media content. It is important to know that the users are contributed in a non-trivial way, so what users are doing in these media co-creative projects is relevant. In the definition by Banks and Potts, co-creation is oriented to innovation, and it's also defined as a co-evolutionary model related to situated creativity with different degrees of participation. And we wanted to add and highlight the idea that there's always an implicit or explicit relationship between industries and external agents. We call them like, it can be fans, amateurs, artists, or whatever, collaborating in industrial projects in some cases. So this general framework, as a result, gave us two different main approaches to co-creation. The first one is the industry-oriented ones, or co-creation projects fostered by industries, aiming at having publics collaborating with them. And the other one is the co-creation led by users, or we call them emergent or non-directive initiatives, which are mostly collective initiatives of making projects, creative projects. And we take the case of Edgar in this framework, and we ask if these photographic communities could be considered a non-directive approach to co-creation, and if that was the case, which was the role of industry in this case. So the second theoretical encounters were when we wanted to add the focus or the view on creativity in co-creation, because the previous approaches were focused mainly on the collective aspects of co-creation projects. Users collaborating with them, users collaborating with industries, but where was creativity in that? So we thought that introducing theories of creativity in this frame could illuminate some aspects, and some of the main authors in this field, like you could see, are the main features of them is that they do not consider creativity as an individual attribute, but maybe they look at creativity as a collective or systemic phenomenon, as we will see later. And on the other hand, we had the perspective of that Edgar was using in his fieldwork was coming from cultural theory, and more specifically from the notion of field by Bourdieu. So then, this is a very synthetic extract of both concepts. So the notion of field is more focused on the tensions and relationships between different actors in a specific field. He used this to identify photography as a field, and the different tensions between, for instance, professionals and amateurs in the making and circulating pictures, and how they negotiate those aspects. And then Csikszentmihalyi describes creativity as the interaction of three subsystems that he identifies them as the person, of course, the domain, which is quite similar to the notion of field by Bourdieu, but more centered in a discipline. For instance, in terms of Csikszentmihalyi, photography is also is a domain. But then he introduces the field, which is mainly the actors that have powers of decision in one specific field. For instance, the fields are the gatekeepers, and gatekeepers are big companies or policymakers. And these gatekeepers are very important in order to introduce innovation or not in the field. So gatekeepers are the ones that let or not introduce innovations in a field. So okay, the encounter says that there were some connections between these two notions. Csikszentmihalyi connects creativity with innovation in the sense that you need to know the rules of a domain in order to be innovative. That means that if you want to innovate in the field of photography, you need to know how it works as a very complex system where there are some relationships between these gatekeepers, the creators, and also the field itself. So the gatekeepers are fundamental, so let's see what happens in the photographic field. I will go to this one, which is more specific. So which are these changes and innovation that Edgar found in his fieldwork? The first one is that professionals and amateurs are, this distinction is not so clear in the digital context, and many photographers that start as amateurs then become kind of semi-professionals or are competing in a way in this emergence of new markets that can be considered as semi-professional. So they sell their pictures, but not so expensive as professionals, but no free like an amateur. So there are also learning communities that emerging surrounding this phenomenon. There are also new actors that weren't in the previous well, before the digital photography, I mean, technological companies, stick memories. So that's very important because they weren't playing in the previous paradigm of photography, and these players are changing the rules. Then there's new circuits of sharing and exhibiting photographies, new photography identities. So what happened with gatekeepers in this, if we look to this in a systemic way, that gatekeepers fail to recognize the importance of these changes. For instance, Kodak was very relevant in the previous paradigm. They failed in not seeing these changes, so they were like, instead of producing digital cameras that they did after that, but initially they focused on digitization services and platforms that were unsuccessful. So these gatekeepers are not only to verify creativity, but to identify potential or actual innovations. So, okay, so that's the last conclusions. What we have seen in this trying to match the empirical findings and our theoretical discussions is that co-creation could be seen as a regarded set of non-directed creative practices, which are all these practices due with photographers in the context of platforms with the technological conditions of so on. So they are fostering alternative circuits of interchange and eventually introducing innovation and changes within a field. So these changes are due to the emergence of new actors that possess different capitals and meanings that had no previous participation in the field and gained presence and capital. So innovation can have a larger scope if we introduce a systemic look, which is introduced in this case by the notion of field or the idea of Csikszentmihalyi of creativity as a system. Co-creation and the transformation can be regarded through the lens of creativity theories, and that introduces also a change in displacing the focus from the creative subjects and the resulting objects to the processes and creative practices. And that's all. Thank you.
In some way, next paper is about autonomy, beyond autonomy, searching for independency. But don't worry, it's not about the process. Dr. Daniel Lopez from STSB Group will present the paper Little Arrangements That Matter, Rethinking Autonomy Enable Innovations for Later Life.
Thanks to Josep for the presentation, and thanks for coming and listening my presentation. My paper is titled Little Arrangements That Matter, Rethinking Autonomy Enabling Innovations for Later Life. Despite it has been recently published, the paper is based on data collected 6 years ago in the context of 2 European projects, Effort and Value Aging, both projects concerned with the ethical and social consequences of ICT innovations for later life. So it is certainly a long time ago, but papers normally in social sciences need time to flourish. The paper attempts to critically discuss the current push towards increasing older people's autonomy, which is usually presented as a mean to pursue healthy aging, as a moral and political struggle against paternalistic policies and ageist discrimination, and above all, as a cost-saving solution to make a social and healthcare system sustainable enough to cope with the so-called grey tsunami. In particular, my intention is to raise some concerns about the leading role of ICT innovation in the promotion of autonomous aging by exploring how aging with autonomy is performed in real-life context when autonomy-enabling innovations are implemented, and in what sense technological innovation enabled or disabled older people to live autonomously. To reflect upon these questions, I will draw on data collected in an ethnographic study of the installation and user adoption of a telecare service, a telecare technology, in Catalonia in 2008 and 2009. I conducted several interviews and observations of all elderly users at their places. For the purpose of this contribution, I will focus on some excerpts from the field notes, which have been anonymized with fictional names and locations. These excerpts display some frictions with the telecare pendant that eventually turned into a matter of discussion with the users. So let me read two of them. During the installation, when the installer, Pera, shows the pendant to wear around her neck, Rosa, a 78-year-old woman who lives alone in a borough in the metropolitan area of Barcelona, come out of her apparent indifference to question the usefulness of the service. Rosa asks, "What if I do not answer to the teleoperator?" And the installer explains to her that they would send help and call her daughter anyway. But if I'm not at home, what happens? The installer replies patiently, "The telecare pendant only works indoors." And Rosa complains, "So if I'm not at home, it doesn't work." Oof. Then she explains that she's hardly ever at home, and the doctor has recommended that she goes for many walks. So if I forget to take the pendant off once, while leaving home, what happens? And Pera, the installer, replies decently, "Don't worry, nothing happens, but better if it doesn't go off while you're going downstairs without realizing it. It's okay, but to avoid shocks." Rosa roared with laughter. "It's better then not to wear it and just use the phone." Pera reacts, "No, you have to wear it, otherwise we'll achieve nothing." Rosa insists, "But I can't get to the phone." Pera tries to make her see reason. "But if you find yourself somewhere and you can't move, the phone will be useless." Rosa replies, "But if that happens, if I can't get from here to there, then it is all over anyway." In Rosa's case, her daughter asked for the service to look after her mother. However, similar frictions regarding the service arise after 1 year, and it happened with users who willingly got it themselves and did not complain during the installation. That is the case of Monse, an 82-year-old woman living alone. She said, "Most of the time, I indeed don't wear the telecare pendant. One of my neighbors, who is pretty frail, wears it all the time, but I'm always going out and moving around up and down. Taking the telecare pendant on and off constantly would be annoying, and I don't want to wear it when I'm out on the street. That's why the telecare pendant is usually hanging in the kitchen, where I spend most of the time. It's near at hand. It is obvious that I couldn't reach it if I fell down. I'm aware of that. But if it happens, it is a question of bad luck. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know. I don't know. I thought that it would be useful to have it here for the future when I will be frail. Actually, I do not feel I really need it now. I got the telecare pendant as a precaution. What we can learn from this friction with the pendant? We could certainly approach them as signs of failing adoption process in which the service is rejected or misused by the users and therefore not incorporated in their daily life. But they suggest a different approach to them. These frictions bring to the fore the social and material arrangements older people relied on to getting by as they age. These arrangements are frictioning because they underwent transformation and interferences among them when a new innovation, such as a social alarm, is implemented. There are at least two arrangements intersecting and frictioning. What I have called an arrangement of security and a community and family arrangement. There are more in the paper, but I'm going to stick to these ones. Both arrangements configure the user's daily life, places such as the home or the street, values and affects such as trust or fear, activities such as care, and also the aging identity of the users are defined differently depending on the arrangements. For the sake of simplicity, I focus on these two arrangements and sum up the main differences between them. As we have seen, the introduction of a social alarm set up a new special border between at home and away from home in terms of safety. According to the security arrangements, the home is defined as a container of threatening events bounded by thresholds of reachability and audibility. So the wider and the clearer the audio range of the telecare terminal and the more accessible the alarm button, the safer the home is. But some users show incompatibility. They prefer to use the phone and do not always wear the pendant at home. Because I think it's an important part of their life happens in the physical spaces such as the communal courtyards, stairs or building entrances, as well as virtual spaces such as the daily phone calls. These in-between spaces might be unsafe, but they are essential to independent living, as they inlays the space for the creation and maintenance of mutual support and solidarity bonds among neighbors and relatives. Moreover, some of them leave the pendant hanging on the wall because they don't want to define their home only in securitarian terms or in medical terms. This is crucial for them to feeling at home and see themselves as still capable of carrying out their daily life. Furthermore, in communitarian and familiar arrangements, there is no room for anonymity or standardization. Trust is built upon personal bonds. In fact, most users do not want to give their home keys to the telecare service because they do not know the person who might take custody of them. In contrast with securitarian arrangements, teleoperators are anonymized, and users trust instead protocolized and certified procedures. Caregiving and caretaking and the identity of the users are also defined very differently depending on the arrangement. In the security arrangement, care must be asked for. It is a response to an explicit request, pressing the alarm. Giving or receiving care is a matter of choice. On the other hand, within communitarian and familiar arrangements, care is an embodied burden that is usually gender-defined, routinized, entails unpaid care work, and it is hard to delegate to others without making meaningless, cold, and a source of guilt. These differences are also reflected in how the aging identity is shaped. In the security arrangement, older people must self-monitor themselves and adjust their lifestyle to foreseen risks. They are defined by risks. In the case of communitarian and family arrangements, they are entangled in reciprocal care relationships. They are also caregivers for other members of the community and the family, not only people at risk. The frictions between these two arrangements challenge the usual understanding of what aging with autonomy means and what might be deemed as good autonomy enabling innovation for later life. It is clear that regardless the age, there is no such a thing as autonomy without arrangements. We are interwoven in different arrangements which define our particular ways of feeling, acting, and relating to the world. These arrangements define our agency. However, the constant adjustment the informant had to make in response to the installation of the telecare system bring to the fore two crucial aspects that were to be considered here: the fragility of these arrangements and the non-normative obligation of taking care of them. Living with autonomy certainly requires endlessly coming up with carefully connecting arrangements to provide users ourselves with balance. I think autonomy in this regard can be considered as caring for those fragile arrangements that hold us and enable us to think and act in a certain way. But if we put this non-normative obligation of caring about our arrangements in the center of aging policies, the role played by the industry of innovation in promoting independent aging is challenged as well. In many cases, the existing arrangements older people depend on to carry on with their lives are scarcely considered when developing technological innovations. Most of the time, these technological innovations are inserted in their lives as plug-and-play solutions that do not require any adjustment. And if they were not other solutions, mostly precarious and handmade, already at place. In contrast, we should consider these everyday and fragile social and material arrangements as truly innovations, instead of assuming as such each brand new product that promises to revolutionize the market for active aging solutions. This would firstly place the fragility of these arrangements at the center of design of any technological innovation, and secondly, it would generate collaborative innovation processes that could just adjust more easily and more effectively the arrangements needed to confront the challenges of aging. So just to conclude, instead of expanding the market for technological solutions, I think the most important challenge in aging societies would be rather to think about systems to maintain and care those little arrangements already at place that hold ourselves up. Thank you very much.
Well, next is a challenge. What is it? Okay. Next is a challenge, how to gather and put together in the same sentence water, fire, war, and Madrid without using the word Barcelona. Well, the artist is Dr. Ucmark from the Urban Transformation Group, and the solution is urban ecology under fire, water supply in Madrid during the Spanish Civil War.
Okay, thank you, Josep, for the introduction, and thank you for coming. In the next 10 minutes, I will try to succinctly present the main results of this paper, which I co-authored with Santiago Gorostiza from Universitat de Coimbra and David Sabri from the Autonomous University of Barcelona. But however, before moving forward, and maybe responding to Josep, I would like to clarify that this paper is not essentially or solely about water or about the environment, but it's about the centrality of urban infrastructure in enabling urban life in moments of crisis, and it's about the importance of the democratic control over the management and the production of knowledge around those infrastructures to be able to cope with moments of stress and disruption. So this paper is one of the outcomes of long-standing collaborative and interdisciplinary research on historical geography and environmental and infrastructure history. And basically we are interested on past events to shed light on contemporary debates around urban management, such as public versus private water supply. In that regard, in the slide you can see a previous paper we published, a similar paper we published on Barcelona and water management during the Spanish Civil War. So for the research, we departed from three main premises. The first one is that water infrastructure has a central role in enabling modern urban life. The second one is that in periods of stress and of disruption is when we realize such importance. And the third one is that there has been a systematic obliteration in the literature on the role of human agency in sustaining complex urban infrastructures under periods of urban stress. So while in the previous publication that I showed before, we focused on Barcelona, this time we wanted to explore a rather different situation, which was the case of Madrid. So a quick overview on Madrid. In Madrid, water supply has been carried out since 1851 by Canal de Isabel II, a state-owned company, which has been undergoing a recent process and a recent polemic process of reconfiguration in the past years. We were interested in investigating the role of this company, which by the way was renamed Canales del Lozoya during the Republic. We were interested in understanding the role of this company during the Spanish Civil War. And more specifically, we were interested in the relevance of workers' knowledge and actions which proved to to be critical in preserving the functioning of water infrastructure and also serve to defend the city. So we draw on two different, albeit interrelated theoretical frameworks. The first one is political and hazard geography, which has had a long-standing interest on 20th century conflicts. In that regard, it is very well known, the book by Yves Lacoste, La géographie ça sert d'abord à faire la guerre. Geography serves above all to make war, in which documented American knowledge on Vietnam's Red River that was mobilized to target specific locations for bombing. Well known are also the attacks against water-related infrastructures in cities such as London, Singapore, or Leningrad during World War II. And water infrastructure continues to be a target of war and conflict. We have only to remind the case of the combats around the Syrian dam of Al Furat in 2013, or as a matter of fact, since 2004 terrorist attacks in Madrid, the water utility stopped to hand out maps of the water infrastructure. The second theoretical framework which has informed our research is the scholarship on the politics and geography of infrastructure. And this research shows the complex interactions between infrastructure networks, technologies, and urban spaces. One of the most prominent scholars in this field, Stephen Graham, very correctly argues that periods of crisis and disruption are perhaps the most powerful way of really penetrating and problematizing those very normalities of flow and circulation. In plain English, during periods of crisis, the invisible becomes visible as we stop to take for granted the magic functioning of urban infrastructures such as water supply. So to carry out our historical research in Madrid, we draw on archives and secondary written resources, as well as oral resources. Here we have some of the examples of the material we work with. Despite the main result of our research is per se a very detailed narrative, which would take me much more than 10 minutes or the remaining 3 minutes I have, I will try to shed light on three key moments of this narrative. The first one was the outbreak of war in 1936, and while the water company in Madrid was not collectivized as it happened in Barcelona, there was an important reconfiguration and significant participation and agency was granted to the workers of the company. And this had a significant effect on the defense of water reservoirs in the hinterland of Madrid. And also it minimized the water restrictions in the city in the early months of the war. But it was, however, during the Battle of Madrid when the role of the workers, when the role of workers' knowledge was more relevant. On the one hand, it ensured the continuity of water supply for the citizens, but it was also mobilized to convert urban infrastructure in a tool of urban warfare to defend the city. So as Madrid resisted the attacks, war efforts shift to other areas of Spain, and as you know, eventually the rebels won the war and 40 years of dictatorship follow. The water company was renamed Canal de Isabel II, not Canales del Lozoya. However, it received an important positive legacy, result of an outcome of the management improvements during the Republic and especially during the Civil War. Among them, the unification of water networks, termination of permanent free of charge water contracts, rationalization of company structure, or suppression of fixed payments for metering use. So, to conclude, our study may be relevant in different and interrelated ways, we think. First, it offers an account on the response to a major hazard, focusing on the role of a company, of the water company and its workforce. Second, it shows how well-organized, well-staffed, and well-equipped organizations may cope with large disturbing events with relative success, as we have seen. And by doing so, we demonstrate how sustaining urban infrastructure, especially during periods of stress, deeply relies on the acts and knowledge of workers. In other words, and to finalize, workers have a crucial role in enhancing infrastructure resilience under periods of hardship and disturbing events. Thank you.
And finally, Dr. and Professor Agustí Cerrillo from GADE Group will present his book. And the title is, you have the presentation here. Okay, nice English, Professor. The principle of integrity in the public procurement, mechanisms to prevent the conflicts of interest and the fight against corruption. It's about Spain.
Yeah. Okay. Bon dia. Bé, gràcies per permetre'm venir a parlar del meu llibre. I began a research 40 years ago when I was preparing my research project for the chair in administrative law, after having to account different data about how corruption is working in Spain. As you can see in the presentation, nowadays corruption is the second problem of the Spanish people. The direct cost of corruption in public procurement, according to European reports, is almost 2,000 million euros per year. And also, it has been stated that corruption increases the cost in public procurement between 20-25% up to 50% of the cost of the contract. So these are really big problems. And I wanted to know how could administrative law try to improve this situation. And I saw that in the last years, the principle of integrity has been seen by different international organizations like the World Trade Organization, the OECD, or the European Union as a catchword that could group all those different mechanisms that can help public administrations to fight against corruption. As you can see, integrity refers to ensuring that public officials and employees act in accordance with the law without any personal interest that, or any personal motivation or any personal goal that could trump the general interest. So integrity tries to guarantee the coherence, the completeness, and the congruence between the activity of public officials and public employees with the law and with the ethics standards that they may act according with. But integrity goes beyond ethics. Integrity is not only an ethic value which has to be followed by public officials and employees, and it's also a word, it's also a variety of mechanisms intended to enable public officials to guarantee good administration while they do their public work. There are many different mechanisms under integrity principle. You can see them in the presentation, and I will try to explain them briefly. First, we can see transparency mechanisms, good management mechanisms, conflict of interest prevention mechanisms, and then finally, control and accountability mechanisms. Transparency mechanisms try to ensure that citizens can know what is happening inside public administration offices. There are many different mechanisms to guarantee transparency in public administration. I have classified them into three groups. Active transparency, which means that public administration itself disseminates information to people, to enterprises, about public procurement. Then we have another mechanism, which is passive transparency, which means that people can ask public administration to give them information they are interested in. And finally, collaborative transparency, which means that people can reuse public sector information in order to improve public transparency. I won't go on with this mechanism, but I have to say that and although it's important to guarantee integrity in public administration, it has to be said that transparency sometimes has to be limited in order to guarantee other principles or other rights of people. Then we have a second group of mechanisms to guarantee public integrity, which I include under the term good management. Good management in public procurement is guaranteed by improving the organization of public procurement and also the procedure used to award public contracts. I have especially focused my attention in the book to see how can ICT improve the management of public procurement procedures. And I've seen that nowadays public electronic means can have an important role in this way. To go on, I will now introduce you into the third group of mechanisms to improve integrity, which are those stated to prevent conflicts of interest. Conflicts of interest refer to any situation in which the people involved in procurement can have any particular financial or economic interest that could be perceived to compromise their impartiality or their independence. It's important to say that the conflict of interest is the main door into corruption. So in those situations where there is a conflict of interest, if this situation of conflict of interest is not well managed, it can lead into a corruption case. There are many different instruments in our regulation that help public officials and public employees to prevent a possible conflict of interest. You have in the presentation the list, obligations of information about their activity or their interest, restrictions on certain activities, disciplinary and criminal measures, mechanisms to ensure both knowledge and assistance for public officials and employees, and finally, the use of codes of conduct, which can state the standards of the behavior which have to be respected by public officials and public employees while they are acting in their office. Finally, the last group of mechanisms are those under the term control and accountability mechanisms. These mechanisms try to oversight and assure that the activity of public officials and public employees are have act according with the legal standards and also with the ethic standards that should govern their behavior. There are many different control and accountability mechanisms in Spanish and in the European regulation. I have studied them all, and I have also analyzed which is their efficiency in order to see if the different control and accountability mechanisms stated are efficient to guarantee integrity and also to prevent conflicts of interest and to fight against corruption. And I have especially focused in these three mechanisms because they are quite new in our regulation, and I think that they can have an important role in order to prevent conflicts of interest and also corruption in Spanish management of public procurement. Procurement courts, anti-fraud offices, and also whistleblowers protection, which tries to help people that know about any corruption case to take it into before the court, but also to they try to protect them against any case of activity against that people. And after having analyzed all these mechanisms, I tried to answer a final question in my book, which was about the legal nature of the principle of integrity. The last question I made while I was doing this research was just to know if the integrity principle is only a concept under which there are many different mechanisms, or if it has a legal nature that we could consider integrity as a legal principle. And the final conclusion I reached was that integrity is not only a word catching all mechanisms to prevent conflicts of interest and to fight against corruption, but it's also a legal principle, that it means that it has a specific role preventing conflicts of interest and fighting against corruption. Thank you all for your attention.
Well, let's start with the fourth and last block of presentations. We still have 5 interesting presentations to come. The first one, then I please call PhD candidate Arnau Monterde, is about a book chapter with the title Mobile Ensembles, the Uses of Mobile Phones for Social Protest by Spain's Indignados.
Thank you to everybody. Today I'm going to talk about 15 May or Indignados movement, from now I will say 15M, and the role of mobile phones during the protest and why it can be useful to understand the 15M from this analytical view. This is the structure of my presentation. I divided the presentation in 4 blocks. And I will start that expressing during the 2011 a kind of wave of global protest sweeps in the world where millions of ordinary citizens employed a huge variety of digital media to demand a greater democratic freedoms and social justice. Mobile phones were widely used and especially in the 15 May experience are significant. But we still don't know if their significance today it can be clear or not. The aim of the chapter that we write with John Postil, sorry I forget it, he's a professor in the University of Melbourne, and the aim of this chapter is to analyze the uses of mobile phones during the 3 different periods that I have selected from 15 May movement during 2011. We have chosen this concept of this concept of mobile ensembles, taking the concept of media ensembles, define it as the unique set of mobile and other technologies that are brought to bear on a specific collective action. For example, occupy a square, preventing an eviction, or holding a general assembly. It seems to us appropriate to mix this connection between communication and social practices. We focus all the time in the combination between practices and technologies. Our theoretical framework is based in some contribution, some different approach, some of them in permanent controversy, but we think that it can be interesting to refer some of them. For example, the concept of proposed by Reinhold as smart mobs that he defined that arise when the human propensity towards cooperation is amplified by information and communication technologies. Probably one example of that is in 2004, the SMS night during the night before the election, the general election, that changed a lot the political situation in the country. But we have other approximations. For example, the optimistic positions about the role of technology as Sharkey does, or the skeptical position from Morozov. Also, it seems to us interesting the proposals from Castells talking about the role of the autonomy in the communication networks on the social movements from 2011, or the role of the emotions, other approximations to refer this kind of new forms of collectivity like swarms or smart mobs, or new forms of aggregation, etc. We can find a lot of different approximations, and we believe that we have to understand that the complexity that that appears in this kind of studies. We also remark in the theoretical part some unresolved issues. For example, how we need specific positions rather than general notions such as new media or digital media, the wider and shifting media environments, and how this can change our analytical point of views. The study of new forms of mobile action is still in its infancy, because there are just a few works and probably gonna appear more during the next years. But I would like to offer you some relevant data. For example, in 2011, a total of 19.3 million of users accessed the internet via mobile networks, an increase of 65.1% since 2010. In this sense, there's a huge increasement during from 2010 to 2011. 2012, this number rise to 24.9 million of lines, and 2013, 29 millions. The third part of the presentation is our approach to the study case. We have divided the study of the movement in three phases. The movement is not just the demonstration in 15 May. The movement is probably still today affecting the Spanish politics, and we would like to emphasize this processual approach because we cannot have like snapshots from specific moments. We need like a long vision of the problem. On this sense, here you have the three stages. The first one is the preparation one, and it's from February 2011 to May, when the big demonstration is produced. This is interesting, and we like to point out this question because a lot of people say that it was a kind of spontaneous movement, and we have been studying the work behind the demonstration, preparing all the demonstration, using the social network sites, and probably in this phases, this phase is characterized by a low intensity of mobile communication, but it's the role of internet it's central. The second phase is the explosion. The explosion is characterized by the moment of replication of the camps, where this replication were produced to more than 100 cities, and how this can happen, that in 1 or 2 days you can have this explosion. And here obviously, the mobile communication plays a key role because it was the main way to access to the internet, and we especially focus on the Twitter users and the streamings produced by the squares. The streaming produced by the squares to explain to the world what was happening there in front of the kind of media silence produced. Also, here you have some relevant data. For example, the new Twitter users created, or the number of Twitter messages produced. For example, we have another important data that from 16 to 18 of May, there was a 20% of increase in mobile data traffic. This means that something is happening in the network. Just the final phase, diffusion. This is interesting because 6 months later, the movement express have a kind of new public apparition with a demonstration in more than 1,000 cities around the globe. Here you have the picture in the places where you can have you can see a demonstration, and we have done this network analysis, and we can see here the connections between the Spanish movement and the others movement as Occupy Wall Street, which was so famous during 2011. Another interesting data that from all those tweets collected here, 30% were from mobile devices, and probably from the transmitted from the main demonstration. Just to close the presentation, we could say that the proliferation of mobile internet devices has opened up countless possibilities for the hybridization of physical and digital spaces. We cannot separate more this relation. We cannot separate what is happening in the physical space and what is happening in the digital sphere. If a few years ago it was still justifiable to separate mobile and internet technologies with the ban of smartphones and the internet in the smartphones, this is no longer possible. And all this suggests, and just to close, the urgent need for analysis of the relationship between mobile technologies, emergent form of protest that take account of the open-endedness and complexity of this relationship. Thank you very much.
The second presentation will be performed by Dr. Ramon Rivera with the article Smart Contradictions, the Politics of Making Barcelona a Self-Sufficient City.
Well, thank you very much for inviting us to present and being here. I hope I keep on 10 minutes. This is a paper that I co-write with Hugo, that you already know him. He started talking about 1936. Now we will move to 2013-14 with a short stop in 1984 and possibly coming back to 1930s at the end. Okay, this paper is about the smart city. I think that all of you have heard about a smart city. All the cities in the world want to be smart, but what is a smart city? A smart city, in the most accepted definition, is when investments in human and social capital and traditional and modern communication infrastructures fuel sustainable economic development and a high quality of life with a wise management of natural resources through participatory governance. Actually, this is very powerful. This is a very win-win solution. You get new technology and you get better quality of life, economic development, and a participatory governance. What else do you want as a city manager? In fact, it's so powerful, this idea, that we don't only find all the cities in the world trying to be smart, but we find that the jungle wants to be smart, like the smart city of Liachai in the Equatorian jungle. The desert wants to be smart, like Masdar in the Emirates, or even in the Antarctica there is a plan of city. In the Antarctica there is a plan of a smart city. I mean, it's basically the urban flavor of the month in urban strategies. And then, as so popular it is, there is a lot of literature trying to understand the smart city, but this literature is completely split. And these two books epitomize the two positions. On the one hand, you have people like Townsend and many, many, many others that think that this is an utopian vision of the city, that the definition that I put at the beginning is what really delivers a smart city. On the other hand, people like Adam Greenfield in LSE or a lot of other people says, it's not that such a bad thing. On the best scenario, they say the smart city is only an empty discourse. In the worst scenario, it's an Orwellian dystopian a scenario of disciplining the citizens, surveillance, and externalization of public services towards private companies and taking the control from citizens. So we thought, what is really the smart city? We didn't want to take sides, and then what we said is start to ask ourselves, is the smart city a radical shift, or is all wine in new bottles? Is empowering citizens, as once and some says, or is a disciplinary technology? Then our goal was, and taking one of the fundamental things that the smart city literature says, or projects, that is environmentally sustainable, but actually there is no much about the research on sustainability in the smart city, to ask these questions. How? With an urban political ecology approach that I won't talk about it, and where? Was basically one of the most famous smart cities in the world, Barcelona. That for our purpose, it had another thing that was interesting, because the branch or the kind of Barcelona smart city that is being developed is a self-sufficient city. In other words, one that it bases all the project in self-sustainability of the city. And as you can see here, and this is based on the work of the head architect of Barcelona, Vicent Guallart, and his team in IAC in Barcelona, they have devised the city from nature to people, infrastructures, and interactions, like understanding the city like it is an internet, the internet of cities. Basically, they say that you should organize the city like internet, and technology then, and software and protocols play a critical role, and we have analyzed that. But not only that, and not only keeping issues on blueprints or discourses, we have gone to the actual existing smart city at different scales. First, to the building scale, and I think that you might know this building a little bit from inside. Second, we went to a bigger scale, the self-sufficient superblock. Third, we went to the Fab Labs, civic centers, but okay, you might say this is very small. No, we look at the interaction between civic centers, Fab Labs, and the district level. And last but not least, we cross, for example, that is a network. This is the 22-watt heat and cold network. Actually, in our buildings in UOC in Poblenou, all the central heating or the air conditioning is going through this network. And these are the 4 examples of the smart city that we look at it. In sum, and in order not to bore you, what we find is that, yes, Barcelona has what we call a smart sustainability fix, meaning it's a way of solving economic, social, and environmental problems, and in solving, allowing Barcelona to try to be a competitive city in the world. However, we also find contradictions. And I will name just only 4 here. The first one is that, on the one hand, there is this very important thing in all smart city discourses and practices of talking about participation and citizens' participations and how technology enhances that. For instance, Guallart in his book says that the smart self-sufficient city will bring more control of citizens over their own life. And it's a very powerful discourse. But when we analyze the strategies, we don't see citizens in these strategies. Or on the one hand, they are completely absent, and it's just basically a top-down, business as usual urban strategy, or is ill-defined. When they mean citizens, they might mean users or developers or other things, which make us to think, okay, yes, smart city, yes. For whose city? From whom? By whom? Which brings us to the second contradiction, that yes, we believe that in some respects, the smart city is a new thing. It's a new ontology of how cities should organize and be managed. It's not only about a new layer of technology in the city, but by transforming socio-environmental problems into essentially engineering problems to be solved using empirically generated quantitative data, it depolitizes the making of urban life. In other words, technology is not neutral, nor negative nor positive. It depends on social relations. And urban problems are not technological or technical. Urban problems are usually social problems, and there are conflicts between groups and social groups and different economic, social, and cultural interests. Therefore, by transforming social, cultural, economic, and in some political problems into technological, we don't solve the problem. We just only move the problem one step further. Then we think that there is an urgent need of repoliticizing the city, meaning meaning that taking into account this conflict and power structures. Third, there is a very strong idea within the Barcelona self-sufficient city that we like very much, that is bringing knowledge and nature, both things, at the core of urban life. It's not that there is the urban and there is nature. There is no dualism. Nature is in the city, and the city is in nature. And we reimagine this relationship through a knowledge-based urbanism. I mean, with all the powerful of technology and the human brain. Yet, our research that, for instance, with colleagues in Manchester, we published as well last year, we find that when studying technological districts or knowledge-based strategies, the most important thing is not technology or talent, but things that might not be very technological, like land rents. Or, as Widuk has presented before, sometimes it's not about the most trendy, catchy technology, but the most important thing to understand how to solve and how to be, if you want, smart, is the importance of not so smart urban infrastructure. Last but not least, we find a very interesting thing, that when smart solutions are designed in Barcelona and elsewhere, they don't look just to the local, they look to the global, to be transferable, scalable everywhere from New York to Mumbai, to Antarctica, to the jungle. But when you look at how this is transported and mobilized, you think that usually they fail. Why? Because they are geographical solutions. They don't take in account how different contexts work and different problems. Basically, they don't take in account the geographies and geometries of power and smart city production. Then, just to finish, as a sort of conclusions, we have these 4 contradictions, and then we have these 4 issues. We want to know whose city, for whom and why. We need, in order to make this question, we'll bring you the necessity of repoliticizing the city and the right of the city, taking into account not only the smart and trendiest technology, but as well the not so smart, and taking as a context the geographies and geometries of powers. And I will end up with two questions. The first one is how then we can manage these contradictions. We don't have a complete answer, obviously, of that. And the second question, can we think in forms, therefore, of democratic control over the production of knowledge and of managing and organizing urban technological infrastructure for the many and not the few? Well, we don't have a definite, we have the questions, we don't have the answers, but one of the things that we are working is precisely looking at that. And as I said at the beginning, I was starting in 1936 and I'm coming back to 36, not because I don't, we want the scenario of 1936, but as the paper of Hugo and Santi and David show, we can learn a lot from the past. Thank you very much.
Well, third presentation of the last block will be given by Dr. Mercè Buixadors with the article Pediatricians' Perceptions of a Potential Online Psychosocial Intervention for Children with Recurrent Abdominal Pain. Thank you, Mercè.
Good afternoon. This is the paper published last year in a journal Pediatrics and Child Health we're going to present today. But first, I'm going to contextualize this research. I'm inviting you to think about these questions. Have you ever heard about RAP, recurrent abdominal pain? O DAR en català, dolor abdominal recurrent? Do you know any children with RAP? Do you think online psychosocial interventions are effective? And do you think pediatricians prescribe psychosocial interventions? And do you think prescribe online psychosocial interventions? Please, think 5 seconds about this. What is already known about RAP? RAP is a common problem in children. The prevalence is about 12%. It has not identifiable organic cause. Psychosocial interventions are effective to improve the quality of life. Online interventions can help to increase access to the treatments. Pediatricians, in general, don't prescribe psychosocial interventions. Now, we are talking about dark web. Dark web is a research project about a specific chronic pain, RAP in children. And dark web is an online psychosocial intervention complementary to the standard medical care. Its focus is on teaching parents and children coping strategies to improve their quality of life or to reduce the pain or the disability of pain. We developed 2 projects. The first project had 2 main objectives. The first was designing the alpha version of dark web, and the second is to make a pilot study with children and parents to assess the feasibility of the program. Now, the next project we are currently working have 2 main objectives too: designing a second version of dark web and assess the effects through a clinical trial. But before to design the first version, we were interested about the opinion of pediatricians to apply the opinion about these psychosocial interventions. And it is the focus of the article we're going to present you. 151 pediatricians participate from Balearic and Catalan societies. 70% were males, 62% working in primary care services, 76% with done more 10 years of experience. All of them answer combining an online survey, combining open and closed-ended questions. And we use mixed methods, combining methodology qualitative and quantitative. I'm going to present you the main results. When we compare the perceived effects between standard medical care, psychosocial face-to-face, and online psychosocial interventions in the 3 dependent variables, pain intensity, disability, and prevention, we can see that psychosocial face-to-face were perceived more effective than standard medical care than online psychosocial interventions. Also, online psychosocial intervention were perceived more effective than standard medical care. Here we can see all the pairs comparisons between all the difference. Another interesting results were when we compare psychosocial and online perceived effects depending on the level of disability. When the level of disability is severe, we can see that online psychosocial intervention were perceived less effective than face-to-face, than moderate or mild disability. When the level of the disability is mild, there aren't, the difference are not significant. Or in other words, when the level of disability is severe, they prefer face-to-face psychosocial interventions. Now, we summarize the main results about qualitative analysis. We asked pediatricians about the perceptions of an online psychosocial intervention, about the characteristics, advantage and disadvantage. And they told the characteristics that the online psychosocial intervention will be easy and attractive design, clear and coherent context. The main disadvantages were related with accessible and comfortable and cheap. And the main disadvantages of an online psychosocial intervention were related to a lack of personal relationship, difficulty of control and monitor, and difficulties about the technologies. Well, after that, I'm going to present you the principal conclusions. Pediatricians have a positive attitude about using online psychosocial interventions. but they prefer face-to-face. Online interventions should be easy to use, attractive, and have a quality of content in order to be applied in a clinical context. For this conclusion, we decided to design the first version of their web, and I show you a 1-minute video. Well, now we are designing the second version of their web, and in the next months we are to start the clinical trial with the families. Then, if you know any children with RAP, please tell them you know their web. Thank you a lot.
First of all, I would like to seize the opportunity to present this work entitled The Level of Telemedicine Use, Comparative Evidence from Samples of Spain, Colombian and Bolivian Physicians. Work that has been co-authored by the doctors Seiji Rubio, Turan Seyen and Jimenez Zarco from UOC Research Center. I will remember that this work has been developed with the support of Open Universitat of Catalunya at the International Project Ibero-American Cluster for University Collaboration on Health. The aim of this study is to analyze the determinant of telemedicine use. The reason is because the incorporation of telemedicine into clinical practice has generated huge expectations due that it offers the potential to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the healthcare organization and the quality of the service provided. Nevertheless, day-to-day clinical practice is still limited and slow implemented. This work has two principal contributions. The first is the purpose of integrative model in the context of technology potential model, taking into account the works of Davis and later Parasunaman and Grewal and Bagozzi and Venkatesh. We propose a model where 5 variables explain the use of telemedicine in this kind of organization. The second contribution is the possibility to compare 3 samples of physicians from different countries, Spain, Colombian and Bolivian, that has different levels of development according to economic indicator and present different profiles of professionals in this organization. So we consider that the degree of ITC implementation in the country healthcare system explain the importance of its determinants of the physician telemedicine use. For develop this work, we use 3 samples. One of a Spanish physician formed by 333 professional. The second one from Colombia, composed by 118 physicians, and finally one from Bolivia. We propose to measure different variables, and particular perceived as useful of ITC in clinical practice and optimism of obtaining it using an exploratory analysis performed by EFA, where the principal axis situation was on promise rotation method, and the factor criteria was used screen test and parallel analysis. The result lets us to confirm some of the hypotheses that we present in the article, considering that the principal variable is the physician level of IPC use in his personal life, and for a Spanish physician, the more important variables were perceived ease of use of ICT in clinical practice and propensity to innovate, whereas in Colombian and Bolivian physicians, it was the level of optimism about ICT. As a principal conclusion, we consider that the more important variable was the level of ITC use, And there are another also variables like some personal factors, another relative to the circle service that led us to explain the use of ICT in the clinical practice. Finally, we can to highlight that there are some variables that can explain the ICT adaptation, some more complex, for example, for a Spanish sample, where the level of ICT use or ease of use can explain this practice, whereas in other countries like Colombian or Bolivian, the optimism and the level of ICT use explain the results.
This paper is also the outcome of a collaborative research with members of Universitat Autònoma de Barcelona and Universitat d'Alacant, and has been recently published in the Journal of Hydrology. So in this paper, we critically analyze the new orientations taken by Spanish water policy since the beginning of 20th century, which basically has revolved around desalination. To do so, we focus on the case of the Mancomunidad de los Canales del Taivilla in southeastern Spain. So before going to the case study, let me briefly present a shorter overview of desalination, because probably you are not very aware of this technology, which is quite weird. But at the global level and the situation in Spain. So we could say that the effects of climate change, population growth, expanding industrial development, combined with the increasing costs and conflicts and impacts around traditional water supply strategies such as dams, water transfers, has resulted in what is known as a global water crisis, which of course has uneven geographical manifestations both in the global north and in the global south. So in this context, desalination is presented as a technological solution to alleviate the effects of this water crisis. However, desalination is not anything new and had been developed over the last 100 years. And for instance, in this quote below, you can see President Kennedy's hopes and desires around this technology back in the mid-20th century. So, in a very simplified way, I'm not going to go into details, but there are two main desalination methods, thermal and membrane methods. And just to mention that the later ones are less energy intensive and are the ones that are most used in, for instance, Spain. Desalination is currently widely used with more than 17,000 desalination plants across 150 countries, producing some 80 million cubic meters per day and partially or totally serving a population around 300 million people in the globe. Of course, the implementation of this technology is geographically uneven, and we find countries such as those in the Arabian Gulf, Spain, or the United States topping the rankings of desalination production. But we also observe emerging countries such as India or China using quite intensively this technology. But in any case, desalination is not problem-free, even if some commentators want to portray that image. But it is increasingly criticized because its environmental impacts, its high energy use, and some issues concerning the access to the desalted water produced. So very briefly, in Spain, desalination can be traced back to the 60s with the first thermal desalination plants in the Canary Islands. Nevertheless, it was the cancellation of the Ebro water transfer, probably all of you are aware of it, back in 2004, when desalination was intensively promoted under the Agua program of the new socialist administration. basically, this plan included the massive development of desalination plants along the Mediterranean coast. The blue stars are the planned desalination plants, yeah. And the Agua program converted Spain into the third country in the world by installed desalination capacity. And this is how a desalination plan look like. This is the El Prat de Llobregat desalination plant, which is one of the biggest desalination plants in Europe, and was a flagship plan of that program. However, there is always a however. Some years later, the desalination program was in the eye of the storm, as it was revealed that the costly desalination plants, funded partially with European money, were working at a very low capacity, or even some of them were almost idle. And the European Union was, of course, not happy at all with this news. So, in the face of this issue, and to understand the underlying reasons that have led to this situation, we use the illustrative case of the Mancomunidad de los Canales del Taivilla in southeastern Spain to reflect and think about basically what happened. The Mancomunidad de los Canales del Taivilla is an autonomous public company that supplies some 80 municipalities of Murcia and Alicante and Aragon, and providing water to some 2.4 million people during the winter. In the summer it's much more. And it's important to say that in 2003 desalination was introduced to the area by the Mancomunidad, and also several desalination plants were also built under the Agua program. So the sources we use for our papers were official technical reports produced by different organisms, as well as conversation with water planners in the area. And we contrasted the real evolution of water use with water demand forecasts. So when tracing the evolution of water use and the sources of water, we observe two things. First, that desalination plants belonging to the Mancomunidad were operating below half of their capacity. But above all, what we saw was that almost no desalted water was used by the Mancomunidad with the desalination plants from the Agua program. So why is that, we ask? Our research showed that first, farmers were reluctant to use desalted water because of the higher costs compared to traditional water sources. Second, and very important, urban growth scenarios were not met because of, as you may know, because of the economic crisis and the collapse of the building sector. And third, we observe a stabilization of urban water demand, or even the reduction of per capita water use, which is a trend that is happening across Europe. Even if we think that we are consuming more water, we are using less water actually per capita. So the combination of these drivers might help to explain why there is such a big gap between production capacity, some 400 million cubic meters in that area, with real water use, less than 194 million cubic meters. So to conclude, desalination in Spain, or more specifically in southeastern Spain, was promoted based on two premises that failed to materialize. The first premise was lower, or at least equal cost of desalination compared to other large-scale water alternatives, such as water transfers, for instance. And second, the second premise which failed to materialize was an expanding urban and tourist demand. This situation has resulted in an unexpected overcapacity of desalination, which is not a bad thing per se, but may lead us to question who will be able to pay for that water, and hence raising some distributional issues. So I'm not going to end with a solution, but rather I will raise a question. Is desalination a real breakthrough in water management, or is only the continuation under another technological form of 20th century water planning subordinated to urban and economic growth scenarios? So thank you.
Thank you very much, Uk. Uk's presentation was the last presentation. We have seen 21 presentations, very interesting, all of them, and from different research areas. But our research showcase has not come to the end because now it's the awards time, okay? So please, if David Mejias can come, he is, as you know, the director of the doctorate school, and he will give 2 extraordinary awards, no, for the thesis.
Okay, we are going to deliver the extraordinary awards for the doctoral thesis in the Information and Knowledge Society program for courses 2012-13 and 2013-14. The extraordinary award for the doctoral thesis in the course 2012-13 is for Sven Sebak. There you go. Congratulations. Now, the extraordinary award for the course 2013-14 is for José Cáceres. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, we move on to the prize for the best presentation that we have seen today, done or made by doctoral students or researchers that they have obtained their PhD degree in the last 2 years. So the jury that was composed by the Doctoral and Research Commission has decided that the prize should go to Amna Qureshi. Please, Director, I'm sorry. Espérate un moment. And last but not least, we have a special prize. As you know, this year, beginning this month and ending, I think, by the end of next spring, we are celebrating our, it's UOC's 20th anniversary. For this, we have created I will read it, UOC 20 Years Award for the most cited researcher. And this prize goes to Santi Caballé. And now our rector will end with some words. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. All right. Dear colleagues, as you know, my style to make speeches is strongly influenced by Fidel Castro's style. And my speech will last between 5 and 7 hours. And in fact, I have 15 issues to go through. And the first point will be broken into 27 points. As you know, I'm joking. I will be as fast as I can, so not to bore you. 5 minutes, thank you very much. She's showing to me. Okay, well, I got a piece of news this morning saying that our 2 professors, Silvia Silvera and Elisenda Estañol, have been awarded the prize. Is any one of them here? Yeah, congratulations. They've got the Prat Gavallí Prize for Publicity and Public Relations. Is that? Okay, congratulations. Well, let me now congratulate you and all of us for the success of this meeting, the UOC Showcase. In the first place, I would like to congratulate very specially the winners of the different awards for the recognition that they represent for their hard work. I would like also to thank and congratulate all the participants and speakers for sharing with us their research results. In the third place, let me very kindly appreciate and congratulate the OSRT members for organizing this relevant event. Finally, so last but not least, let me thank all of you for attending this UOC Showcase, because it's very important for our institution that we all get acquainted and share our mutual research progress. You all know how important research is from my point of view. Research is a pivotal activity of the university. We could not be considered a leading university if we didn't foster knowledge generation and research. The aim of this showcase, that is meant to take place biannually, is precisely to favor mutual interaction and networking among UOC researchers and to give internal visibility to our research achievements. I would like to point out that research is an extremely important indicator for our external recognition and notoriety. Good research reinforces the strength of our brand and plays a relevant role in our marketing. In fact, good research and academic notoriety of our researchers is an attractor for new good students joining our university. At this point, let me put forward the idea that other universities are exploring. Since research is interwoven within the academic activity, could we think about getting students involved in some investigation activities in order that they could taste the flavor of research within their training program? This could well be a very appealing experience for some good students and a way to recruit future PhD students. Our Vice President, Dr. Marta Imeric, has been showing us how we should progress in the future in order that research at UOC becomes as relevant as in the best universities around us. This is in fact a strategic issue for our institution. In terms of our research focus, this means that we need to look for excellent research, and this will mean both to provide the necessary support to the best groups of research within UOC and to incorporate external research talent whenever possible. It is in this sense that we have the possibility to host these excellent research groups within IN3. IN3 should be a research center of excellence where world-level research should be produced. Research groups led by experienced group leaders should find a space at IN3 where they could develop their work. Although this means to set up a very demanding scenario on IN3 research, it also aims the achievement of our most ambitious objectives as a university. We will take the due steps in this direction. Finally, let me remind you how important good research is, even if immediate applications cannot be foreseen. I do not comment on the structure of DNA, for example, because many people have already pointed out the tremendous social and economic consequences that this discovery in basic science has meant. But let me though remind you about LEDs for lighting. When back in the 60s, the first LED was invented as a device, and during the 70s and 80s, it remained a laboratory curiosity. You have seen that from the 90s on, we have seen that from the 90s onwards, it has introduced a fantastic revolution on lighting industry. We could say that good engineering has brought a scientific discovery into a successful technological device. Therefore, we could state that good basic science may have always a return, even if it is only as a knowledge generator. In this sense, we should not be mistaken, and to illustrate my words, let me end up by quoting Albert Einstein. He said, "If instead of studying electromagnetic fields, we had concentrated our efforts in making engineers to solve the lighting problems, we would have today the most formidable oil lamps." Thank you to everyone, and we will meet again at the showcase in 2 years' time. Good luck to everybody.